Arizona Cardinals, Carson Palmer. Heading into 2013, the Arizona Cardinals were stuck in quarterback purgatory. Kevin Kolb had failed, the offense had no identity, and a talented defense was being wasted. Arizona sent a 2013 6th-round pick and a conditional 2014 7th-round pick, and also swapped picks to receive Oakland's 2013 7th-rounder in the deal for Carson Palmer, a quarterback most people had already written off. On paper, Palmer was viewed as immobile, aging, and damaged by years behind bad offensive lines in Cincinnati and Oakland. The price reflected that skepticism. This was a low-risk, high-need move. Palmer delivered the best quarterback stretch in Cardinals history. Under Bruce Arians, he thrived in a vertical offense, peaking in 2015 when he threw 35 touchdowns, earned MVP votes, tied for second in AP voting, and led Arizona to a 13-3 record. His defining moment came in the 2015 divisional round versus Green Bay, where he repeatedly attacked downfield and set up Larry Fitzgerald's iconic overtime touchdown. Palmer took the Cardinals to the NFC Championship game, something the franchise had rarely experienced. That move bought Arizona relevance and its clearest Super Bowl window. Atlanta Falcons, Julio Jones. Entering the 2011 NFL Draft, the Atlanta Falcons were already built to win. Matt Ryan was established as the franchise quarterback, the roster had proven it could reach the playoffs, and expectations were shifting from contention to championships. Atlanta lacked a true game-breaking presence on offense, someone who could bend coverage, dictate matchups, and tilt the field every snap. Rather than settling for incremental improvement, the Falcons made one of the boldest draft day moves of the modern era. They traded 5 draft picks to Cleveland to jump up to number 6 overall and select Julio Jones. The cost was enormous, especially for a wide receiver, and criticism came immediately. The logic was simple but aggressive. Atlanta wasn't chasing draft value or roster balance. They were chasing dominance, betting that one elite weapon could change the ceiling of the entire franchise. Julio Jones justified that bet almost instantly. From his first seasons in the NFL, he turned into the most physically overwhelming receiver in football. Too strong to jam at the line, too fast for safeties, and impossible to cover one-on-one. Defensive game plans shifted around him before the snap, often sacrificing coverage elsewhere just to survive his presence. He led the NFL in receiving yards twice, routinely producing massive performances without needing excessive targets, and his gravity unlocked the Falcons' passing attack, elevating Matt Ryan and turning Atlanta into a weekly matchup nightmare. That impact reached its peak during the 2016 season and culminated on the sport's biggest stage. While protecting a late lead during Super Bowl 51, Julio made one of the greatest catches in Super Bowl history, a sideline toe-tap grab that required flawless timing, balance, and control. The play should have sealed a championship. Even in defeat, it crystallized Julio's legacy, not just production, but inevitability. Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson. Going into the 2018 NFL Draft, the Baltimore Ravens were quietly approaching a turning point. Joe Flacco was still on the roster, but his decline was evident. The offense had grown rigid, explosive plays were rare, and his contract limited roster flexibility. Internally, Baltimore understood the franchise's championship window was closing. What they needed was not a short-term fix, but a pathway into a new era. That opportunity appeared as Lamar Jackson, the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, inexplicably slid down draft boards. Despite elite production and jaw-dropping athleticism at Louisville, teams fixated on perceived flaws, unconventional mechanics, questions about accuracy, and even debates about whether he should change positions. While other franchises hesitated or overthought the evaluation, Baltimore remained patient, watching value fall into reach. When Jackson dropped to the end of the first round, the Ravens acted decisively. They traded back into pick number 32 with Philadelphia, sending a package of mid-round selections to secure Jackson, and critically, a 5th-year option. This was a calculated gamble. Baltimore were not looking for or drafting an immediate Flacco replacement or a plug-and-play quarterback. They were betting on a complete offensive transformation built around speed, spacing, and schematic stress rather than traditional structure. That bet paid off almost instantly. Jackson took over late in his rookie season, led the Ravens to the playoffs, and gave everyone else a preview of something entirely different. The evolution came to a head in 2019 when he won NFL MVP, guided Baltimore to a 14-2 record, and delivered one of the most dominant seasons ever by a quarterback. Lamar Jackson's statement moment came on Monday Night Football against the Rams, when he dismantled the NFL's most respected defense with 5 touchdown passes. By the way, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed and dropped a like for the algorithm. Buffalo Bills, Tom Cousino, assets to Jim Kelly. By early 1980s, the Buffalo Bills were a franchise drifting without direction. They lacked star power, national relevance, and, most critically, a quarterback capable of elevating the organization. Linebacker Tom Cousino was one of Buffalo's most valuable assets, and instead of clinging to short-term respectability, the Bills used that value strategically. Buffalo traded Cousino and stockpiled draft picks across multiple seasons, a quiet maneuver that drew little attention in the eyes of the league. Buffalo used the Cousino situation to stockpile leverage and picks in an era when they desperately needed a franchise QB. That positioned them to take Jim Kelly in 1983, and then to wait out his USFL detour until he arrived in 1986. But the plan hit an immediate obstacle. Kelly chose the United States Football League, signing with the Houston Gamblers instead of joining the NFL. Many teams would have panicked or moved on. Buffalo didn't. They held Kelly's rights, confident that patience, not urgency, would pay off. When Kelly finally arrived in Buffalo in 1986, he didn't ease into the role. He seized control of the franchise. He evolved into the unquestioned leader of the offense and the architect of the K-Gun, a no-huddle system built on tempo, precision, and relentless pressure. Defenses weren't just beaten, they were worn down, forced to defend at a pace they couldn't sustain. Buffalo transformed almost overnight from an afterthought into the most feared team in the AFC. That dominance was undeniable from 1990 to 1993, when Kelly led the Bills to 4 consecutive Super Bowl appearances, an accomplishment unmatched in NFL history. While the losses often overshadow the era, Buffalo ruled the conference, highlighted by a 51-3 demolition of the Raiders in the 1990 AFC Championship game. Kelly's arm strength, toughness, and command of the offense made the Bills a nightmare matchup. Carolina Panthers, Greg Olsen. Heading into 2011, the Chicago Bears made a move that barely caused a ripple back them, but would end up reshaping another franchise. They traded Greg Olsen to the Carolina Panthers for a 2012 third-round pick, effectively moving on from a player they never fully maximized. He was a miscast in Chicago, used more as a complementary piece than the matchup weapon his skill set allowed him to be. The Bears saw a tight end. Carolina saw something much bigger. The Panthers believed Olsen's true value was intelligence, route precision, and defensive awareness. He could diagnose coverages mid-route, adjust on the fly, and become a reliable outlet when plays broke down. With this acquisition, Carolina wanted structure and stability for an offense built around physicality and improvisation. While the deal drew little national attention, internally, the Panthers viewed Olsen as a foundational piece, not a luxury. Once in Carolina, Olsen established himself as indispensable almost immediately, especially as Cam Newton emerged as one of NFL's most dynamic quarterbacks. When defenses collapsed the pocket or erased primary reads, Olsen became Newton's security blanket, the player he trusted to be in the right spot at the right time. From 2014 to 2016, Olsen posted 3 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons, a near unprecedented achievement for a tight end, built on elite route running, spatial awareness, and flawless timing rather than gimmicks or broken plays. That impact peaked during Carolina's 2015 Super Bowl run. Against Seattle in the divisional round, Olsen delivered multiple clutch receptions that sustained drives and punished defenses for overcommitting to stop the run. When opponents loaded the box to contain Newton and the Panthers' power rushing attack, Olsen emerged as the release valve that kept the offense balanced and functional. For the cost of a mid-round pick, in addition to filling a position, Carolina gained reliability, leadership, and offensive clarity. Chicago Bears. Dick Butkus pick. By the mid-1960s, the Chicago Bears weren't simply trying to add talent. They were fighting to preserve an identity. Defense had always defined the franchise, and as the NFL began shifting toward more modern, offense-driven football, Chicago made a deliberate choice to anchor itself to what it believed in. Chicago acquired a 1965 first-rounder from Pittsburgh by trading away a 1964 second-rounder and fourth-rounder to secure the 1965 first-round selection used to draft Dick Butkus. Butkus was already regarded as an elite collegiate defender, but even that reputation undersold what was coming. Chicago were trading for intimidation, intelligence, and total control of the middle of the field. From his first snap, Butkus enforced defense. He hit with violence, stripped the ball with purpose, and patrolled sideline to sideline with a speed and awareness that redefined the middle linebacker position. Offenses quickly learned that avoiding Butkus was part of the game plan, and often discovered it didn't matter. Quarterbacks hesitated longer. Running backs lowered their heads earlier. His strip tackles turned out to be his signature moments, turning routine plays into sudden momentum swings. Even in an era with limited television exposure, his reputation spread across conferences. Fear traveled faster than highlights. Despite playing on Bears teams that rarely contended for championships, Butkus established himself as a Hall of Fame icon and the purest embodiment of Chicago football. He wasn't remembered for rings or playoff runs. He was remembered for presence, dominance, and fear. That trade did two things. It delivered a great player, and it crystallized the Bears' philosophy. Defense first, toughness always. Cincinnati Bengals. James Brooks. By the early 1980s, the Cincinnati Bengals were searching for offensive flexibility in a league that still treated running backs as one-dimensional power players. The San Diego Chargers had James Brooks, a versatile but underutilized weapon whose skill set didn't fully align with their system. Cincinnati saw opportunity where San Diego saw redundancy, believing Brooks could unlock a different kind of offensive ceiling. The Bengals acquired Brooks in a low-profile trade that barely registered nationally. There was no star power attached, no immediate sense of impact. But Cincinnati's coaching staff had a specific vision. Brooks was more than a runner. He was a space player. The goal was reimagining how a running back could stress defenses both horizontally and vertically at a time when most schemes weren't built to handle that kind of versatility. Once in Cincinnati, Brooks turned into one of the most innovative offensive weapons of his era. He motioned out wide, ran receiver-quality routes, and routinely forced linebackers into coverage mismatches they couldn't survive. During an era dominated by power football, Brooks brought creativity and unpredictability. His impact peaked during the Bengals' run to Super Bowl 23, where he served as a constant pressure point in an offense built on balance, deception, and tempo. What made Brooks special wasn't just production. Timing and influence were big with him. His presence forced defenses to declare coverages early, opened space for the run game, and kept Cincinnati's offense adaptable week to week. Long before pass-catching running backs was central to modern offenses, James Brooks was already executing that role at a high level. Cleveland Browns. Deshaun Watson. By the time the Cleveland Browns entered the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes in 2022, the franchise was acting under the weight of history. Decades of quarterback instability had defined Cleveland's modern era, even as the roster around the position had finally become playoff caliber. The Browns believed they were no longer rebuilding. They were one quarterback away, and that belief pushed them toward an all-in decision rooted in both desperation and conviction. Cleveland sent an unprecedented haul to the Houston Texans, 3 first-round picks, a third-round pick, and additional mid-round selections, then followed it with a fully guaranteed contract that reset the quarterback market. No team had ever committed that level of draft capital and financial security to a single player. The move was aggressive, controversial, and polarizing, signaling that Cleveland was done with half measures. On the field, the gamble was rooted in Watson's proven ceiling. Before off-field issues interrupted his trajectory, he was one of NFL's most dynamic quarterbacks, combining elite pocket poise with rare improvisational ability. He punished pressure, routinely turning broken plays into explosive gains. His peak came during the 2020 season when he led the NFL in passing yards despite playing on a struggling Texans roster, consistently elevating the offense around him. For Cleveland, the trade represented hope wrapped in risk. Watson symbolized escape, a chance to finally stabilize the most important position in professional sports after decades of churn. Whether the move is ultimately remembered as bold or reckless, its significance is undeniable. Dallas Cowboys. Herschel Walker. Heading into 1989, the Dallas Cowboys were at absolute rock bottom. They were coming off a disastrous season, had just hired Jimmy Johnson, and were beginning a full teardown of a broken roster. The only true star left was Herschel Walker, a dominant, marketable running back in his prime, and easily the most valuable asset the franchise possessed. To most teams, Walker was the player you build around. To Dallas, he was leveraged. The Minnesota Vikings believed Walker was the final piece needed to push them into Super Bowl contention, and they paid accordingly. Dallas sent Walker to Minnesota in exchange for a massive package of players and draft picks spread across 3 drafts, with one crucial wrinkle. The Cowboys could convert many of those players into additional draft selections. Back then, the deal was widely criticized. Dallas appeared to be giving up the best player in the trade. The reality was sacrificing short-term production for complete control over their future. The real impact of the trade didn't arrive in a single season. It unfolded over years of sustained dominance. The draft capital acquired from Minnesota helped build the core of a dynasty, including Emmitt Smith and Troy Aikman, alongside an elite offensive line and Michael Irvin. From 1992 to 1995, Dallas won 3 Super Bowls in 4 seasons, overpowering every team in the NFL with balance, physicality, and star talent. Smith emerged as the defining postseason runner of his era, while Aikman delivered precision performances on the biggest stages, including Super Bowl MVP honors. Unlike most famous trades, this one didn't create a single iconic highlight. It created an era, championships, Lombardi trophies, a dynasty that forced the entire league to rethink how draft capital was valued. No trade in NFL history has produced more sustained success or reshaped team-building philosophy more dramatically. Denver Broncos. John Elway. In 1983, John Elway was the most coveted quarterback prospect the NFL had seen in years, and he made one thing clear: he would not play for the Baltimore Colts, who held the #1 overall pick. Elway publicly threatened to pursue a professional baseball career rather than join a dysfunctional franchise, using leverage few prospects had ever possessed. That stance forced Baltimore into a corner and created a rare opening for a team bold enough to act. The Denver Broncos recognized the opportunity immediately. Rather than waiting for draft day chaos, Denver negotiated directly with the Colts, sending a package of players and a future first-round pick in exchange for Elway's rights. This was a daring move at the time, given that it happened in an era when teams were conservative with draft capital. Denver wasn't just acquiring a quarterback. They were securing relevance, credibility, and a foundation to build around before Elway had taken a single NFL snap. Elway not only justified the trade, he carried it for nearly 2 decades. From the moment he arrived, the Broncos emerged as perennial contenders, with Elway leading Denver to 5 Super Bowl appearances. Early in his career, he became synonymous with late-game comebacks, fourth-quarter drives, and fearless downfield throws, often dragging undermanned rosters deep into the playoffs through arm strength, toughness, and sheer will. Even when Denver lost on the biggest stage, Elway's presence kept the franchise competitive year after year. The defining moment of his legacy came late, in Super Bowl 32. At 37 years old, with his career nearing its end, Elway scrambled for a critical first down and launched himself into contact in the iconic helicopter dive, a play that embodied toughness, sacrifice, and refusal to yield. Denver won its first Super Bowl and followed it with another championship the next season, finally rewriting Elway's narrative. Detroit Lions, Matthew Stafford. By the end of the 2020 season, both the Detroit Lions and Matthew Stafford had reached the same conclusion. The time to move on was now. Stafford had given Detroit everything he had: toughness, elite arm talent, and countless comeback wins. But the franchise remained trapped in a cycle of competitiveness without real contention. Rather than prolonging a situation that no longer served either side, the Lions chose clarity over sentiment and committed to a clean break. By the end of January 2021, Detroit sent Stafford to the Los Angeles Rams in exchange for Jared Goff, a 2021 third-round pick, and first-round picks in 2022 and 2023. This move is viewed as one of the most consequential quarterback trades in league history, not just because of the talent involved, but because of what it signaled. Detroit wasn't chasing short-term relevance anymore. They were fully committing to a long-term rebuild, prioritizing flexibility, draft capital, and organizational reset over clinging to a familiar star. The impact of the trade revealed itself in layers. The draft picks turned into foundational players who reshaped the roster with youth, speed, and physicality, allowing Detroit to build a sustainable core instead of relying on one quarterback to cover structural flaws. At the same time, Goff quietly stabilized the offense. Free from the pressure of directly replacing Stafford's legacy, he grew into a leadership role, delivering late-game comebacks and running an efficient, composed offense that restored belief inside the locker room and credibility around the league. The true significance of the trade was momentum and not a single highlight. Detroit transitioned from survival to structure. The offense was now functional, the roster balanced, and the culture shifted from resignation to expectation. Green Bay Packers, Brett Favre. In 1992, the Green Bay Packers were a proud franchise trapped in decline. Decades removed from their Lombardi-era dominance, Green Bay had become synonymous with quarterback instability and fading relevance. Lambeau Field still carried history, but belief was gone. Incremental fixes weren't enough anymore. The Packers needed a reason to believe the franchise could matter again. That belief arrived through a gamble. Green Bay sent a first-round pick to the Atlanta Falcons for Brett Favre, a raw, hard-throwing quarterback who had barely played in Atlanta and was widely viewed as reckless and unreliable. Around the league, the move was questioned. Favre looked like a backup with a cannon arm and no control. Green Bay, however, wasn't trading for polish. They were trading for fearlessness, arm talent, and the belief that chaos, if properly guided, could become greatness. Favre didn't take long to change the franchise's trajectory. Brett Favre's first meaningful appearance with the Packers saw him come off the bench and throw a game-winning touchdown that instantly electrified Lambeau Field. From that moment on, the energy around the team shifted. Favre evolved into the engine of a reborn Packers franchise, winning 3 consecutive NFL MVP awards, restoring Green Bay as a perennial contender, and leading the team to a championship in Super Bowl 31. Favre's career in Green Bay was defined by audacity, last-second touchdowns, impossible throws, and comeback wins fueled by sheer belief. He made mistakes, but he made football joyful again in Wisconsin. Brett Favre brought swagger back to Lambeau, turned Sundays into events, and bridged Green Bay's storied past into a modern era of sustained excellence. Without this move, there is no Packers renaissance. Kansas City Chiefs, Patrick Mahomes. Heading into spring 2017, the Kansas City Chiefs were already successful, but boxed in. Under Andy Reid, they were playoff regulars, disciplined, well-coached, and consistently competitive behind veteran quarterback Alex Smith. The problem was the ceiling. Kansas City knew exactly how far that version of the team could go. To break through, they would have to risk everything that had made them stable. That risk came on draft night. The Chiefs traded up with the Buffalo Bills, surrendering premium draft capital to move into the top 10 and select Patrick Mahomes. At the time, Mahomes was viewed as a boom-or-bust gamble, a gunslinger from an air raid system with unconventional mechanics, aggressive instincts, and a highlight-heavy resume that scared traditional evaluators. Kansas City didn't draft him to fit their offense. They drafted him to replace it. Reid was betting that creativity, arm talent, and instinct mattered more than orthodoxy. When Mahomes became the starter in 2018, the league shifted almost overnight. He threw 50 touchdown passes, won NFL MVP, and turned supposed quarterback mistakes into repeatable weapons. No-look throws, off-platform lasers, and impossible completions delivered with calm precision. Kansas City evolved from contender to standard-bearer, reaching multiple AFC championship games, winning Super Bowls, and sustaining dominance rarely seen in the modern era. Mahomes changed how the Chiefs execute their offense. He expanded it, elevating everyone around him and erasing deficits that once felt insurmountable. The trade's value crystallized in the 2021 divisional round against Buffalo, the 13 seconds game. With almost no time left, Mahomes calmly delivered 2 instant completions to force overtime, then ended the game himself. This was not your ordinary comeback, but inevitability. Coverage rules changed. Defensive logic broke. Quarterback expectations permanently shifted. This acquisition didn't simply land a superstar. It created a dynasty, redefined offensive football, and placed Kansas City at the center of the NFL universe. New England Patriots, Randy Moss. In 2007, Randy Moss was widely viewed as damaged goods. Once the most feared deep threat in football, Moss had just endured 2 disastrous seasons with the Oakland Raiders, defined by dysfunction, losing, and visible frustration. His effort was questioned, his attitude scrutinized, and many around the league believed his best football was already behind him. The talent was undeniable, the belief was gone. The New England Patriots saw something completely different. They sent Oakland a 4th-round pick, a shockingly low price for a receiver of Moss's caliber. Bill Belichick believed Moss hadn't lost his ability, he had lost structure. New England offered discipline, role clarity, and the perfect quarterback pairing in Tom Brady. For minimal cost, the Patriots acquired the most physically dominant receiver of his generation at exactly the right moment. The result was one of the most explosive offensive seasons in NFL history. By the end of 2007, Moss caught 23 touchdown passes, shattering the single-season record and redefining vertical dominance in a modern passing offense. Defensive backs weren't just beaten, they were erased. Paired with Brady, Moss turned routine throws into instant touchdowns through elite speed, body control, and unmatched red zone dominance. New England went 16-0 in the regular season, overwhelming defenses that knew what was coming and still couldn't stop it. Moss's delivered weekly, 3 touchdown games, deep strikes that flipped momentum instantly, red zone fades that felt automatic. While the season ended 1 win short of perfection, the significance of the trade was undeniable. The 2007 Patriots offense became the benchmark for offensive dominance, and Moss's resurgence permanently reframed his legacy. New England turned a 4th-round pick into one of the most devastating weapons the league has ever seen, proving that context doesn't just matter in football, it defines careers. Seattle Seahawks, Marshawn Lynch. In 2010, the Seattle Seahawks were searching for something more basic than talent. They were searching for a foundation. The roster was in transition, the offense lacked intimidation, and there was no defining personality to anchor the team. Buffalo's Marshawn Lynch was a former first-round pick whose career had stalled. Injuries, inconsistency, and friction with the Buffalo Bills had pushed him out of favor, and around the league, he was no longer viewed as a franchise-altering player. Seattle saw something others missed. The Seahawks traded a fourth-round pick and a conditional mid-round pick to acquire Lynch in a deal that barely registered nationally. This was not a move for production or name value. Seattle were betting on attitude. Internally, Seattle believed toughness could travel, that a single player could change how a team played, practiced, and competed. They weren't trading for statistics. They were trading for edge. Lynch's punishing running style immediately altered Seattle's offensive personality. Every carry was violent, every yard contested, every drive physically taxing for defenses. The transformation crystallized in the 2010 NFC wildcard game against New Orleans, when Lynch broke tackle after tackle on a thunderous touchdown run, so powerful it registered on seismic equipment. The play immortalized as Beastquake. That run did two things. It won a playoff game, and it announced Seattle's arrival. From that moment on, the Seahawks had a clear blueprint: physical, relentless, unapologetic. Lynch became the heartbeat of a team that would dominate the NFC, fueling deep playoff runs and serving as the offensive counterweight to the Legion of Boom. His legacy in Seattle was built on tone-setting runs, fourth-quarter wear-down drives, and a mentality that broke opponents mentally as much as physically. This trade gave Seattle a running back. It gave them a soul and laid the foundation for the most successful era in franchise history. San Francisco 49ers, Jerry Rice. Heading into the 1985 NFL Draft, the San Francisco 49ers were already champions, fresh off a Super Bowl and firmly established under Bill Walsh. But Walsh was thinking more than just sustaining success. He wanted to extend it. He believed the next evolution of the West Coast offense required a receiver who could do everything at an elite level: run every route, separate with precision, block with intent, and dominate without relying on pure speed. That belief pushed San Francisco to act aggressively. The 49ers traded up in the first round, surrendering multiple premium picks to select Jerry Rice out of Mississippi Valley State. This move by the 49ers was bold at the time, given Rice was a small school prospect many teams didn't fully understand. Around the league, doubts centered on Rice's level of competition and whether his game would translate against NFL defenses. San Francisco ignored consensus and trusted evaluation. They weren't trading up for flash or measurables. They were trading up for mastery. What followed was the most dominant career in NFL history, regardless of position. Rice became the standard for consistency, excellence, and longevity, winning 3 Super Bowls and serving as the offensive backbone across multiple championship eras and quarterbacks. His postseason dominance was unmatched, highlighted by Super Bowl 23, where he posted 11 catches for 215 yards, still the single-game receiving record in Super Bowl history. Defenses knew where the ball was going and still couldn't stop it. Beyond championships, Rice rewrote the record book: career receptions, receiving yards, touchdowns, playoff production, and longevity. His route running was surgical, his conditioning legendary, and his separation in critical moments inevitable. That move secured the defining weapon of the West Coast offense and extended the 49ers dynasty across decades. Philadelphia Eagles, A.J. Brown. On draft night in 2022, the Philadelphia Eagles made one of the cleanest and most decisive moves of the modern era. Instead of waiting years for a rookie receiver to develop, Philadelphia traded a first-round pick and a third-round pick to the Tennessee Titans for A.J. Brown, then immediately signed him to a long-term extension. For Eagles, this move symbolized a rare moment of clarity. A proven, elite receiver entering his prime was available for draft pick cost because of contract concerns, not performance. The Eagles recognized the inefficiency instantly. Brown was already a dominant NFL receiver, capable of winning at every level of the field. Philadelphia didn't want projection or patience. They wanted certainty. By acquiring Brown, they removed guesswork from the offense and installed a known, reliable force who could dictate coverage from day one. The impact was immediate. From his first game in Philadelphia, Brown reshaped the offense with his physicality, run-after-catch ability, and dominance in one-on-one matchups. Defenses were forced to adjust. Safeties crept closer, boxes lightened, and coverage rules bent. Most importantly, Brown unlocked Jalen Hurts. With a true alpha receiver on the outside, Hurts evolved from a question mark into an MVP-caliber quarterback, attacking tight windows with confidence and trusting throws before breaks. The Eagles' offense became one of the league's most efficient and explosive units almost overnight. That transformation hit its high point during Philadelphia's run to Super Bowl 57. Brown delivered dominant postseason performances, capped by a physically imposing Super Bowl showing where he punished defenders with strength, balance, and elite ball skills. Every time the Eagles needed momentum, Brown supplied it, not with finesse, but force. This trade completed the offense, stabilized the quarterback position, and accelerated Philadelphia straight into championship contention. Washington Commanders, Sonny Jurgensen. By the mid-1960s, Washington Redskins were a franchise caught between eras. The league was still dominated by conservative, run-heavy offenses, but change was coming, and Washington needed a quarterback capable of leading it rather than reacting to it. That opportunity arrived through a rare quarterback-for-quarterback trade when Washington sent Norm Snead and Claude Crabb to Philadelphia for Sonny Jurgensen. The deal didn't dominate headlines, but internally it reflected strong conviction. Washington believed Jurgensen's struggles in Philadelphia were situational, not a reflection of his talent. That belief proved correct almost immediately. Once in Washington, Jurgensen emerged as one of the most gifted pure passers the NFL had ever seen. At a time when most teams leaned on the run, he attacked defenses vertically with confidence, arm strength, and precision. He led the league in passing yards and passing touchdowns multiple times, doing so in an era when defensive contact rules and offensive limitations made those accomplishments far more difficult than in modern football. Jurgensen's ability to stretch the field fundamentally changed Washington's offensive identity. His deep throws off play action punished defenses that crowded the line of scrimmage, while his pocket poise and diagnostic ability allowed him to exploit coverages before they fully developed. Washington suddenly had an offense that dictated terms rather than surviving conservatively. Even without consistent championship success, the team became respected for its ability to throw the football in a league still hesitant to embrace the pass. Jurgensen built his legacy on influence, not on a single iconic play or postseason run. He modernized Washington's offense, proved that a pass-first philosophy could succeed ahead of league-wide adoption, and gave the franchise credibility during a transitional era. That acquisition brought innovation, legitimacy, and a franchise icon. Houston Texans, DeAndre Hopkins. On draft night in 2013, the Houston Texans were already contenders, coming off back-to-back division titles with one of the league's most physical rosters. What they didn't have was a true number one receiver, someone who could win in isolation, survive tight coverage, and stabilize the offense in high-leverage moments. Houston addressed that by trading pick number 27, 2013 first, pick number 77, 2013 third, and pick number 89, 2013 third, to Miami to move up and draft DeAndre Hopkins. It was aggressive, but calculated. This move reflected belief in a player capable of defining the Texans' offense for years. At the time, the move didn't dominate headlines. Hopkins wasn't viewed as a flashy, speed-based prospect, but Houston saw something different: elite hands, physical toughness, and an unmatched ability to win contested catches. They were not drafting hype or measurables. They were drafting reliability. Hopkins' game was built for tight windows and hostile coverage, and the Texans trusted that skill set to translate regardless of circumstance. That belief proved correct almost immediately. Hopkins became one of the most dependable receivers in football, producing elite seasons despite constant quarterback changes and heavy defensive attention. He led the league in receiving touchdowns in 2017, and in 2015, he finished second in receiving yards in the NFL. At Texans, Hopkins thrived in isolation and treated contested throws as opportunities. Double coverage rarely mattered. If the ball was in the air, Hopkins played as if it belonged to him. Houston's offense ran through Hopkins. In high-leverage games, he delivered defining performances, repeatedly winning one-on-one matchups when answers were needed most. This trade did more than land the Texans a great receiver. It gave them offensive certainty. Indianapolis Colts, trading away Jeff George. By 1994, the Indianapolis Colts had reached the end of the Jeff George experiment. George was one of the most naturally gifted passers in football, a cannon arm, effortless deep velocity, prototype size. But constant tension between player, coaches, and locker room made the situation unsalvageable. Talent was never the issue. Stability was. Rather than letting a toxic situation linger, Indianapolis chose leverage. The Colts traded George to the Atlanta Falcons for a 1994 first-round pick, a 1994 third-round pick, and a conditional 1995 first-round pick that ultimately conveyed. It was a massive return for a quarterback whose value swung wildly between elite ability and organizational friction. This was an organizational reset, not a football-fit decision. In Atlanta, George showed exactly why the Colts were able to command that price. He played some of the best football of his career at Atlanta and led the Falcons to the playoffs. When protected and allowed to attack vertically, his arm talent was overwhelming. His success reinforced a simple truth. The problem was never his ceiling, it was sustainability. For Indianapolis, the real win was control. The draft capital gave the Colts breathing room and a clean break from a situation that had stalled progress. This trade stands as one of their most important, not for bringing back a star, but for allowing them to walk away at their peak value. Jacksonville Jaguars, Mark Brunell. In 1995, the Jacksonville Jaguars were an expansion franchise with no margin for patience. Most new teams accept years of losing while searching for a quarterback. Jacksonville refused to wait. Instead of gambling in the draft, they targeted immediate stability, trading a 1995 third-round pick and a 1995 fifth-round pick to the Green Bay Packers for Mark Brunell, who was buried behind Brett Favre. Around the league, Brunell was viewed as a capable backup with tools, not a future cornerstone. For Jacksonville, this was a calculated shortcut. They weren't chasing upside 3 years down the road. They needed competence, leadership, and calm immediately. Brunell brought experience from a winning environment, an understanding of NFL defenses, and the ability to survive chaos. The trade was urgent, intentional, and perfectly aligned with what an expansion team actually needs. In only their second season in 1996, Jacksonville stunned the league by reaching the AFC Championship game, one of the fastest ascents ever by an expansion franchise. His poise on the road, especially in playoff wins over established teams, gave the Jaguars instant credibility. His mobility shaped the offense, extending plays and punishing defenses without slipping into recklessness. From 1996 through 1999, Jacksonville became one of the NFL's winningest teams, reaching multiple AFC Championship games and posting consistent double-digit win seasons. Brunell became the face of the franchise's golden era. Expansion teams aren't supposed to work this fast, but Jacksonville skipped years of instability for the cost of mid-round picks. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 1995, draft, trade down. By the mid-1990s, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were buried under years of losing and draft misfires. They didn't just need talent, they needed structure. In the 1995 NFL Draft, Tampa resisted desperation and traded down, choosing additional premium picks over tying their future to a single savior. It reflected a clear understanding that one player wouldn't fix a broken foundation. At the time, the move felt unremarkable. Trade downs rarely generate excitement, especially for struggling teams. But Tampa's front office prioritized depth and margin for error over hope. Accumulating picks allowed them to build a roster deliberately instead of gambling everything on one decision. Winning the weekend didn't matter. Reshaping how the franchise built teams did. That philosophy triggered a chain reaction. The added draft capital helped Tampa construct a dominant defensive core built on speed, discipline, and violence. That identity came to define the franchise, anchored by cornerstone defenders like Warren Sapp and Derrick Brooks, players who shaped Tampa Bay football for an entire generation. The payoff peaked in Super Bowl 37, when Tampa's defense overwhelmed Oakland Raiders in one of the most dominant championship performances ever. While the 1995 trade down didn't draft every star directly, it marked the philosophical pivot that made that era possible. Tennessee Titans/Houston Oilers, 1996, draft, trade down. By 1996, the Houston Oilers were a franchise surrounded by uncertainty, ownership turmoil, declining attendance, and an impending relocation meant they needed flexibility, not a headline-grabbing gamble. Instead of locking themselves into a single premium draft slot, Houston traded down in the 1996 NFL Draft, exchanging short-term buzz for control, depth, and leverage. To casual fans, the move looked uninspiring. There was no star attached, no instant payoff to celebrate. Internally, though, the Oilers were making a structural decision. Accumulating early and mid-round picks gave them options as the organization braced for transition, not just a new season, but a new city, a new identity, and an uncertain competitive future. The value of that choice emerged over time. The added flexibility helped stabilize the roster through the move to Tennessee and laid the groundwork for the team that eventually became the Tennessee Titans. That roster-building philosophy fueled a late 1990s contender that reached Super Bowl 34, coming 1 yard short of a title. The defining image of that era, Kevin Dyson being tackled just short of the goal line, doesn't exist without years of patient, disciplined team building. This trade is remembered for its responsibility, not its flash. When panic would have been easy, the Oilers chose patience. Sometimes the best trade isn't the one fans cheer, it's the one that keeps the franchise alive long enough to matter again. Pittsburgh Steelers, Troy Polamalu. In the 2003 NFL Draft, the Pittsburgh Steelers identified one player who perfectly fit their defensive DNA, Troy Polamalu. The problem was clear: he would not fall to them. Sitting outside the typical range for elite defensive prospects, Pittsburgh made a rare move, trading up with the New York Jets to secure him late in the first round. Pittsburgh sent pick 27th and pick 92, third, to the Jets. They received pick 16 from the Jets. For a franchise built on patience, this was pure conviction. The decision stemmed from the belief that Polamalu could elevate the entire defense. The Steelers prioritized conviction over testing numbers and projections. They were betting on instinct, intelligence, and controlled chaos. From the moment Polamalu took over the secondary, Pittsburgh's defense became unpredictable and suffocating. He didn't operate within the structure, he bent it. Blitzes arrived from nowhere. Routes disappeared mid-throw. Plays died before quarterbacks understood what they were seeing. His signature moments are etched into NFL history. The defining one came in the 2008 AFC Championship game when Polamalu intercepted Joe Flacco and returned it 40 yards for a touchdown, sealing Pittsburgh's trip to the Super Bowl. That play captured everything he was: anticipation, explosion, and perfect timing under maximum pressure. His Defensive Player of the Year season only confirmed his impact, producing game-changing plays that rarely showed up in traditional coverage metrics. Polamalu helped lead Pittsburgh to 2 Super Bowl championships and helped preserve the Steelers' defensive continuity into a new era. Quarterbacks changed protections based on where he might be. Coordinators burned practice time, preparing for chaos they couldn't predict. In addition to landing a Hall of Fame safety, this trade protected the Steelers' soul. Troy Polamalu was disciplined, wrapped in disorder, and Pittsburgh was willing to move mountains to get him. New Orleans Saints, Ricky Williams. In 1999, the New Orleans Saints were desperate for relevance. Years of losing had worn down the fan base, and incremental progress no longer felt acceptable. That desperation led to one of the boldest draft day gambles in NFL history, as New Orleans traded an unprecedented package of picks to the Washington football team to move up and select Ricky Williams. The deal included their entire 1999 draft class, plus future picks. Not a rebuild plan, but an all-in declaration that Williams was the rebuild. At the time, the logic was clear. Ricky Williams was viewed as a once-in-a-generation running back prospect, powerful, explosive, and capable of carrying an offense by himself. The Saints committed fully instead of hedging or spreading risk. They believed Williams could redefine the franchise overnight and become the focal point of everything they did. It was extreme, unapologetic, and instantly became league folklore. On the field, Williams delivered real impact. He ran with violence, balance, and endurance, absorbing massive workloads and punishing defenses that knew what was coming. His breakout 2000 season, when he rushed for over 1,000 yards and scored 8 touchdowns, helped lead the Saints to their first ever playoff victory, a defining moment in franchise history. For a fan base starved of success, Williams brought credibility, belief, and tangible progress. The cost, however, was inseparable from the legacy. By sacrificing so much draft capital, New Orleans limited its ability to build depth around him, and his brilliance could only carry the roster so far. The trade became a cautionary tale about betting everything on one star. Still, it mattered. Ricky Williams didn't create a dynasty, but he changed the emotional trajectory of the Saints, proving they could matter, even if only for a moment. New York Giants, Eli Manning. The 2004 NFL Draft produced one of the most dramatic quarterback standoffs in league history. The San Diego Chargers selected Eli Manning #1 overall, but Eli made it clear he would not play for them. Rather than force a fractured relationship, San Diego struck a deal with the New York Giants, who were desperate for stability at quarterback. New York acquired Manning in exchange for Phillip Rivers, a 2004 third-round pick, a 2005 first-round pick, and a 2005 fifth-round pick, a massive price paid out of urgency, not caution. Certainty drove this trade, not value charts or patience. The Giants believed Eli Manning was uniquely built for New York, mentally tough, unflappable under pressure, and capable of surviving the city's spotlight. The decision to trade up centered on certainty rather than upside. They were trading up for composure, trusting that when everything tightened, Manning wouldn't. That belief defined his legacy. While Manning's regular season career was often streaky, his postseason resume is untouchable. He led the Giants to 2 Super Bowl championships, both against the New England Patriots dynasty. The defining moment came in Super Bowl 42, when Manning escaped a near-certain sack and launched the throw that set up David Tyree's helmet catch, a play that exists only because Manning refused to go down. 4 years later, he delivered again in Super Bowl 46, engineering another clutch fourth-quarter drive capped by a pinpoint sideline throw to Mario Manningham. 2 Super Bowls, 2 Super Bowl MVPs, both against a team many considered unbeatable. Eli Manning's trade did more than give New York a quarterback. It brought them immortality, all traced back to one bold decision on draft night. New York Jets, Joe Namath signing. In the mid-1960s, professional football was split between 2 leagues fighting for legitimacy. The AFL needed stars, credibility, and proof it could stand toe-to-toe with the NFL. The New York Jets understood that reality better than anyone. Their move to acquire the rights that led to Joe Namath represented a calculated strike for relevance, visibility, and belief, not just roster improvement. Namath was a rare commodity. He had elite arm talent, confidence bordering on audacity, and the personality to command national attention. The Jets knew landing him wouldn't just change their team, it would change how the entire league was perceived. It was a declaration that the AFL could produce stars big enough to rival anything the NFL had to offer. Namath delivered exactly what was required. Before Super Bowl III, he famously guaranteed a Jets victory over the heavily favored Baltimore Colts, then backed it up with a poised, mistake-free performance. The Jets' win shattered the myth of NFL superiority and instantly legitimized the AFL on the sport's biggest stage. That victory by the new Jets altered football's power structure and accelerated the AFL-NFL merger. For the Jets, Namath became a franchise icon. For the sport, he became a turning point. His trade changed professional football forever, making it one of the most important trades in league history. Las Vegas/Oakland Raiders, Willie Brown. In 1967, the Oakland Raiders were still defining who they wanted to be. The AFL was young and chaotic, and Al Davis believed control came through takeaways, not just offense. When Oakland acquired Willie Brown from the Denver Broncos through waivers, it barely registered as a blockbuster. But the Raiders knew exactly what they were getting. Not safe coverage, but a defensive weapon built for aggression. Brown transcended the role of a cover corner, pairing elite instincts and rare ball skills with the confidence to gamble without losing discipline. Oakland was building around pressuring quarterbacks, baiting throws, and turning defense into offense. Philosophy drove this trade, not name recognition. Willie Brown fit perfectly into a vision designed to intimidate, punish mistakes, and flip games instantly. Once in Oakland, Brown became the backbone of the Raiders' defense for more than a decade. He dictated how quarterbacks played, erasing routes and turning routine snaps into momentum swings. His defining moment came in Super Bowl XI, when he read Fran Tarkenton perfectly, intercepted the pass, and returned it 75 yards for a touchdown. At the time, the longest interception return in Super Bowl history. The play sealed a championship and captured Raiders football at its peak. Brown helped lead Oakland to multiple Super Bowl titles, anchoring a defense built on pressure, turnovers, and fear. Willie Brown gave the Raiders swagger in the secondary and a blueprint for dominance without the ball. Oakland didn't trade for a cornerback. Los Angeles Chargers, Eli Manning/Philip Rivers. The 2004 NFL Draft put the San Diego Chargers in a no-win situation. They selected Eli Manning, #1 overall, but it was immediately clear he would never play a snap for them. Rather than panic or accept a discounted return, San Diego leaned into leverage, negotiating with the New York Giants and turning resistance into opportunity. The Chargers flipped Manning's rights for Philip Rivers, a 2004 third-round pick, a 2005 first-round pick, and a 2005 fifth-round pick. A calculated pivot defined this move, not damage control. San Diego believed Rivers had the arm strength, toughness, and competitiveness to anchor the franchise, and the added draft capital ensured the move was more than a one-player gamble, but a broader roster investment. Rivers became the face of the Chargers for 16 seasons, providing rare stability at quarterback. He delivered elite production year after year, piling up passing yards, touchdowns, and Pro Bowl selections while keeping the team consistently competitive. His defining trait was toughness, most famously displayed during the 2007 postseason when he played through a torn ACL and still led the Chargers to the AFC Championship game. While San Diego never reached a Super Bowl with Rivers, his tenure produced multiple division titles, deep playoff runs, and some of the league's most dangerous offenses. More importantly, he gave the franchise continuity, something far more valuable than a single draft hit. This trade turned a draft day standoff into more than a decade of relevance. In addition to recovering from losing Eli Manning, this trade helped secure the Chargers' future in the process. Los Angeles Rams, Marshall Faulk. In 1999, the St. Louis Rams were drifting, cycling through quarterbacks and identities without finding a true core. That changed when they traded with the Indianapolis Colts to acquire Marshall Faulk for a 1999 second-round pick and a 2000 fifth-round pick. Faulk was already a star, but Indianapolis still viewed him primarily as a running back nearing a contract crossroads. The Rams saw something much bigger. In St. Louis, Faulk became the offense itself rather than a simple positional upgrade. Head coach Dick Vermeil and coordinator Mike Martz envisioned an attack built around his versatility, forcing defenses into impossible choices every snap. Load the box and get burned through the air. Spread out and get punished on the ground. Faulk became the engine of the greatest show on turf, transforming the Rams into an offensive juggernaut. He won NFL MVP in 2000, produced 4 straight 2,000-yard from scrimmage seasons, and emerged as the most complete offensive weapon in football. His ability to run, catch, block, and dictate coverage made traditional defensive roles obsolete. That impact was most evident during the Rams' 1999 Super Bowl run, where Falk's presence unlocked everything around him, including Kurt Warner. Linebackers couldn't cover him, safeties couldn't tackle him, and defensive schemes collapsed trying to account for him. This trade didn't just create a champion, it created one of the most influential offenses the NFL has ever seen. Miami Dolphins, Larry Little. Not every franchise-altering move comes with headlines. In the late 1960s, the Miami Dolphins were still a young organization searching for credibility. They didn't need flash, they needed a foundation. That's why acquiring Larry Little mattered so much. While most fans barely noticed offensive linemen, Miami understood championships are built in the trenches. The move itself was quiet. No hype, no drama. Just smart team building rooted in control and durability. The focus for Miami was leverage at the line of scrimmage, not skill position buzz or short-term attention. Little gave them exactly that, becoming the kind of player whose value shows up not in highlights, but in how games slowly tilt out of reach. Larry Little became a cornerstone of one of the greatest dynasties in NFL history. As part of Miami's legendary offensive line, he helped power a rushing attack that overwhelmed defenses week after week. His impact was central to the Dolphins' run of 3 straight Super Bowl appearances and back-to-back championships, including the iconic 1972 undefeated season. There isn't one defining highlight attached to Little's legacy, and that's the point. His dominance showed up in entire games controlled by halftime, in clean pockets, sustained drives, and fourth-quarter clock killers. This trade didn't bring Miami a poster star. It brought them command of the line of scrimmage, and with it, sustained dominance. Larry Little did more than help the Dolphins win titles. He helped define what championship football looks like. Minnesota Vikings, Jared Allen. By 2008, the Minnesota Vikings were close, but not complete. They had a physical defense, a strong run game, and a roster built to contend, but they lacked one thing, a pass rusher who could end drives by himself. Minnesota didn't want rotational pressure. They wanted fear. That search led them to Kansas City Chiefs and Jared Allen, already one of the league's most disruptive edge rushers. The Vikings paid a steep price, a first-round pick, 2 third-round picks, and a 6th-rounder, and they did it without hesitation. A declaration defined this move, not bargain hunting or projection. Minnesota believed one elite defender could tilt the balance of the entire team, and Allen was a known problem offenses had to plan around every single week. Allen exceeded his expectations. From the moment he arrived, protection schemes bent around him. Tackles needed help, tight ends stayed in, and quarterbacks sped up their internal clocks before the snap. His most famous season came in 2011, when he recorded 22 sacks, almost tying the single-season sack record and turning every week into a chase for history while terrorizing offenses across the league. His impact went beyond numbers. Allen was a central force on the 2009 Vikings team that reached the NFC Championship game, creating short fields, forcing turnovers, and allowing the defense to dictate games rather than react. Relentlessness, not just strength or technique, is what made him special. He wore down offensive lines, erased comfort, and turned close games into survival tests. Arizona Cardinals, Kevin Kolb trade, 2011. In 2011, the Arizona Cardinals believed they had finally found their franchise quarterback. Coming off a season of instability at the position, Arizona targeted Kevin Kolb, who had flashed potential in limited action with the Philadelphia Eagles. The Cardinals thought they were buying upside, not realizing how steep the cost would become. To get Kolb, Arizona sent cornerback Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie and a second-round pick to Philadelphia. Rodgers-Cromartie was already a Pro Bowl caliber defender and one of the league's better cover corners. The second-rounder only added to the risk. The return never materialized. Kolb struggled to stay healthy and struggled even more when he did play. Across 2 seasons in Arizona, he never won more than 3 games in a single year as a starter. He missed time with concussions, turnovers piled up, and the offense never stabilized. By 2013, the Cardinals had already moved on. Meanwhile, Philadelphia benefited immediately. Rogers Cromartie stepped into their secondary and provided strong play before later becoming a key piece of Denver's Super Bowl 50 defense. Arizona, on the other hand, was forced back into quarterback limbo for years. The damage was twofold. The Cardinals lost a premier defensive player and a valuable draft asset, all for a quarterback who failed to elevate the team or stay on the field. It delayed their rebuild and forced them to keep chasing answers under center. Atlanta Falcons, Brett Favre trade, 1992. In 1992, the Atlanta Falcons made a decision that would haunt the franchise for decades. Just 1 year earlier, Atlanta had drafted Brett Favre in the 2nd round. He was raw, reckless, and struggled early, but the arm talent was obvious. Still, the Falcons' coaching staff lost patience quickly. Off-field concerns and inexperience convinced them he wasn't the future, so they traded him. Atlanta sent Favre to the Green Bay Packers in exchange for a 1st-round pick, which became running back Tony Smith. The return was modest, even by early 90s standards. The expectation was simple. Atlanta wanted stability. Green Bay wanted upside. The result could not have been more lopsided. Favre took over as Green Bay's starter almost immediately and went on to become one of the most accomplished quarterbacks in NFL history. 3 straight MVP awards, a Super Bowl title, over 70,000 passing yards, Iron Man durability that redefined the position. Meanwhile, Atlanta spent the next decade cycling through quarterbacks, never fully recovering from letting a generational talent slip away. Tony Smith never became a cornerstone player, and the trade quickly became a symbol of organizational impatience. What makes this trade especially painful is the timing. Favre didn't need years to develop. He broke out almost instantly. Atlanta didn't just misjudge his ceiling, they misjudged how close he already was. Baltimore Ravens, Kyle Boller draft trade, 2003. In 2003, the Baltimore Ravens were desperate to find a long-term answer at quarterback. Their defense was championship caliber, but the offense had stalled after the Super Bowl run. Baltimore believed Kyle Boller had the tools to change that. He had arm strength, athleticism, and came from a big program at California. The Ravens convinced themselves he was worth aggressive movement on draft day. To secure Boller, Baltimore traded up 22 spots with the New England Patriots, sending a future 1st-round pick as part of the deal. At the time, it was a bold gamble for a franchise that rarely moved up in the draft. The problem was the return never matched the price. Boller struggled almost immediately. He lacked consistency, accuracy, and pocket awareness. Over 5 seasons as Baltimore's starter, he never threw more than 19 touchdowns in a year and finished with more interceptions than touchdown passes. The offense remained limited, forcing the Ravens to win games despite the quarterback position instead of because of it. The long-term cost made the trade even worse. The Patriots used the future 1st-round pick to select Vince Wilfork, who became a cornerstone of their dynasty and a Hall of Fame-level defensive tackle. Baltimore, meanwhile, spent years searching for another quarterback before eventually landing Joe Flacco in 2008. Buffalo Bills, Kelvin Benjamin, trade, 2017. In 2017, the Buffalo Bills believed they were one wide receiver away from stabilizing their offense. At the trade deadline, Buffalo sent a 3rd-round pick and a 7th-round pick to the Carolina Panthers for Kelvin Benjamin. The move was meant to give Tyrod Taylor a true number one target as the Bills pushed for their first playoff appearance in nearly 2 decades. It backfired almost immediately. Benjamin arrived out of shape and struggled to separate from defenders. Over parts of 2 seasons in Buffalo, he caught fewer than 25 passes total. His effort was questioned. His role diminished quickly, and tensions reportedly grew in the locker room. By the middle of the 2018 season, Buffalo had already released him. The opportunity cost made the trade worse. That third-round pick could have been used to build around a young core that would soon include Josh Allen. Instead, it was spent on a short-term rental who never contributed meaningfully. The Bills eventually ended their playoff drought anyway, but Benjamin had nothing to do with it. The trade became a symbol of a front office move driven by urgency rather than evaluation. Carolina Panthers, Sean Gilbert trade, 1998. In 1998, the Carolina Panthers made one of the most aggressive trades in franchise history in an effort to rebuild their defense. Carolina sent 2 first-round draft picks to Washington in exchange for defensive tackle Sean Gilbert, believing they were acquiring a dominant interior force entering his prime. At the time, giving up multiple firsts was reserved for elite, game-changing talent. Gilbert was productive, but not transformative. Over 4 seasons in Carolina, he recorded solid numbers and made a Pro Bowl, but he never became the kind of defensive cornerstone that justifies sacrificing 2 premium draft picks. He didn't elevate the unit, didn't change offensive game plans, and didn't push the Panthers into contention. The real damage came from what Carolina lost. Those 2 first-round picks stripped the Panthers of flexibility during a critical period in the franchise's development. Instead of adding young, cost-controlled talent, Carolina was locked into an expensive veteran whose impact plateaued quickly. By 2002, Gilbert was gone, and the Panthers were left without either the player or the draft capital. This trade wasn't a total failure on the field, but relative to the cost, it was a major overpay. Chicago Bears, Mitchell Trubisky draft trade, 2017. In 2017, the Chicago Bears believed they had identified their franchise quarterback. Holding the 3rd overall pick, Chicago traded up 1 spot with the San Francisco 49ers to select Mitchell Trubisky. The cost was significant. The Bears sent a 3rd-round pick, a 4th-round pick, and a future 3rd-round pick to move up a single position. The evaluation proved disastrous. Trubisky started 50 games over 4 seasons, but never developed into a consistent or reliable passer. He struggled with accuracy, decision-making, and reading defenses. While the Bears did make the playoffs twice during his tenure, the offense consistently held the team back. What makes the trade unforgivable is who was left on the board. Chicago passed on Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson, both of whom became elite quarterbacks almost immediately. The Bears didn't just miss, they paid extra to miss. San Francisco used the additional picks to help rebuild their roster, while Chicago burned valuable draft capital chasing a quarterback who never matched the hype. By 2021, Trubisky was gone, and the Bears were starting over once again. This trade represents the worst-case scenario. A team moved up, paid a premium, and still walked away with the wrong player at the most important position. Cincinnati Bengals, Ki-Jana Carter, draft trade, 1995. In 1995, the Cincinnati Bengals were convinced they were landing a franchise-defining running back. Cincinnati traded up to secure Ki-Jana Carter, sending the 5th overall pick and a 2nd-round pick to move higher in the draft. Carter was coming off a dominant college career at Penn State and was viewed as a rare combination of speed, power, and explosiveness. The gamble unraveled almost immediately. Carter tore his ACL in his very first preseason game before ever taking a regular season snap. He missed his entire rookie year, and when he returned, he never looked the same. Across 3 seasons in Cincinnati, he rushed for just 747 total yards and never became a focal point of the offense. The cost made the outcome far worse. The Bengals didn't just miss on a pick. They surrendered additional draft capital that could have helped rebuild a struggling roster. Instead, they tied their future to a player who never recovered physically, forcing the franchise to reset yet again. This trade wasn't about poor effort or bad attitude. It was about risk and timing. Cincinnati paid a premium for upside, and the injury erased it before it ever had a chance to materialize. Cleveland Browns, Brady Quinn draft trade, 2007. In 2007, the Cleveland Browns believed they had stolen their franchise quarterback. Brady Quinn slid down the draft board, and Cleveland aggressively moved up to secure him, trading a 2007 second-round pick and a 2008 first-round pick to make the selection. At the time, Quinn was viewed as a safe prospect with size, arm strength, and experience at Notre Dame. The investment never paid off. Quinn struggled to win the starting job, then struggled even more when he got it. Across 3 seasons in Cleveland, he started just 12 games, throwing 12 touchdowns against 17 interceptions. The offense stagnated, confidence eroded, and by 2010, the Browns had already moved on. The aftermath made the trade look even worse. Cleveland eventually traded Quinn to Denver for Peyton Hillis and a 6th-round pick. While Hillis had one memorable season, the Browns had already lost the more valuable asset, the future first-round pick they gave up to draft Quinn in the first place. That pick represented a lost opportunity during a critical rebuild window. Instead of adding foundational talent, Cleveland tied itself to a quarterback who never stabilized the position. This trade fits a familiar Browns pattern from that era: high expectations, aggressive movement, and a quick reset when things went wrong. Dallas Cowboys, Joey Galloway trade, 2000. In 2000, the Dallas Cowboys were trying to jumpstart an offense that had stalled after the dynasty years. Dallas traded 2 first-round picks to the Seattle Seahawks for wide receiver Joey Galloway, believing they were acquiring an elite deep threat to pair with Troy Aikman and revive the passing game. At the time, Galloway was one of the fastest receivers in the league and coming off multiple 1,000-yard seasons. The trade unraveled almost immediately. Galloway tore his ACL in the first game of the season and missed the entire year. When he returned, Aikman was gone. The offense had changed, and Galloway never became the focal point Dallas envisioned. Over 4 seasons with the Cowboys, he never reached 1,000 yards and scored just 16 touchdowns. Seattle, meanwhile, capitalized on the draft haul. Those picks became key pieces in rebuilding the Seahawks roster during the early 2000s, while Dallas struggled to regain relevance. The issue wasn't just bad luck. The Cowboys paid an elite price for a player at a volatile position without accounting for risk. 2 first-round picks represented years of roster flexibility, and Dallas surrendered both for production they never received. Denver Broncos, Steve Tensey trade, 1968 to 1969. In the late 1960s, the Denver Broncos were desperate to stabilize the quarterback position and believed Steve Tensey was the answer. Denver traded 2 first-round picks to the San Diego Chargers for Steve Tensey, a backup behind John Hadle. The move was aggressive even by AFL standards, and it assumed Tensey could immediately step in as a franchise starter. That assumption was wrong. Tensey struggled badly in Denver. In 1969, he led the Broncos to a 3-11 record while throwing more interceptions than touchdowns. The offense stalled, the team regressed, and it quickly became clear that Denver had overpaid for a quarterback who was not starter caliber. The long-term damage came from the draft capital. Those 2 first-round picks could have helped Denver build foundational talent during a critical era. Instead, the Broncos sacrificed years of roster flexibility for a player they moved on from almost immediately. This trade stands out because it wasn't a near miss or a gamble that just didn't work out. It was a misevaluation from the start. Denver paid a premium price for a backup quarterback and received backup-level production. Detroit Lions, Bobby Lane trade, 1958. In 1958, the Detroit Lions made a decision that altered the trajectory of the franchise for decades. Detroit traded Bobby Lane, a Hall of Fame quarterback and 3-time NFL champion, to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Lane had led the Lions to multiple titles in the 1950s and was the face of the franchise. The trade was driven largely by internal conflict and the belief that Detroit could move forward without him. They were wrong. After the trade, the Lions collapsed. They would not win another playoff game for decades, while Lane helped stabilize the Steelers and laid the groundwork for what would eventually become one of the NFL's most successful franchises. Detroit, meanwhile, entered one of the longest stretches of futility in league history. The move became so infamous that it spawned what fans still refer to as the curse of Bobby Lane, the idea that Detroit was doomed after trading away its greatest quarterback. While the curse is symbolic, the results were real. Detroit failed to return to championship relevance, cycling through coaches and quarterbacks without success. This trade wasn't just bad value. It stripped the franchise of leadership, identity, and stability in one move. Green Bay Packers, Terrell Buckley trade, 1995. In the mid-1990s, the Green Bay Packers quietly made one of the most lopsided trades in franchise history. Green Bay traded Terrell Buckley, a former 5th overall pick, to the Miami Dolphins for future considerations. At the time, Buckley had already shown flashes of being a quality cover corner, but the Packers had grown impatient with his inconsistency. The return was essentially nothing. Buckley went on to enjoy a long, productive career with multiple teams, becoming a reliable starter and eventually winning a Super Bowl later in his career. He carved out more than a decade in the league after leaving Green Bay, proving he was far from a lost cause. The Packers, meanwhile, gained no tangible asset in return. No draft pick, no player, nothing that could be used to improve the roster. This trade stands out not because Buckley became a superstar, but because Green Bay gave away a valuable former top 5 pick without securing any meaningful compensation. Even modest draft capital would have softened the blow. Houston Texans, DeAndre Hopkins trade, 2020. In 2020, the Houston Texans made what is widely viewed as one of the worst trades in modern NFL history. Houston traded DeAndre Hopkins, an all-pro receiver and the face of their offense, to the Arizona Cardinals. In return, the Texans received running back David Johnson, a second-round pick, and a late-round pick swap. The imbalance was obvious immediately. Hopkins was coming off multiple elite seasons and was one of the most consistent receivers in football. He required no special system, rarely missed games, and routinely dominated double coverage. Arizona plugged him in and watched him post another all-pro level season almost instantly. Houston, meanwhile, absorbed Johnson's contract and declining production. He never became a focal point of the offense and was gone within 2 seasons. The draft compensation did little to offset the loss of a generational talent at a premium position. What made the trade worse was the timing. Houston was still in a competitive window with Deshaun Watson on a rookie contract. Instead of maximizing that window, the Texans removed their best offensive weapon and weakened the roster on purpose. This trade wasn't driven by cap necessity or long-term strategy. It was the result of poor evaluation and internal mismanagement. Indianapolis Colts, Trent Richardson trade, 2013. In 2013, the Indianapolis Colts believed they were one piece away from contending with Andrew Luck on a rookie contract. 2 games into the season, Indianapolis traded a first-round pick to the Cleveland Browns for Trent Richardson, a former top 3 selection who was supposed to stabilize the backfield. The urgency was clear. The Colts wanted immediate production, not long-term development. They never got it. Richardson struggled almost instantly. He lacked vision, missed obvious running lanes, and failed to create yards after contact. In 2 seasons with Indianapolis, he averaged just 3.1 yards per carry and never reached 1,000 rushing yards. By 2015, he was out of the league entirely. The cost made the failure even more damaging. That first-round pick could have been used to add protection for Andrew Luck or strengthen a roster that was still thin in key areas. Instead, it was spent on a running back whose decline was already underway. What separates this trade from others is how quickly the warning signs appeared. Cleveland was willing to move on from Richardson almost immediately, and Indianapolis ignored what that suggested. The Colts gambled premium draft capital on a position with short shelf life and got replacement-level production in return. During one of the most important windows in franchise history, that mistake mattered. Jacksonville Jaguars, Blaine Gabbert draft trade, 2011. In 2011, the Jacksonville Jaguars believed they had found their quarterback of the future. Jacksonville traded up into the top 10 of the draft to select Blaine Gabbert, sending multiple draft picks to move from the middle of the first round to the 10th overall selection. The move was aggressive, especially for a franchise that was still rebuilding its roster. The evaluation failed quickly. Gabbert struggled from the moment he stepped onto the field. He lacked pocket awareness, played skittish under pressure, and failed to develop as a passer. Over 3 seasons in Jacksonville, he threw more interceptions than touchdowns and never showed signs of becoming a reliable starter. What made the trade especially damaging was the process behind it. Reports later revealed that the Jaguars' coaching staff was not fully aligned on the decision. The front office made the move without complete buy-in, leading to a fractured development plan from the start. Gabbert was placed in unstable systems with frequent coaching changes, which only accelerated the failure. The Jaguars wasted valuable draft capital chasing a quarterback who was not ready and never became one. By 2014, Gabbert was gone, and Jacksonville was forced back into another rebuild. Kansas City Chiefs, Joe Montana trade, 1993. In 1993, the Kansas City Chiefs believed they were one quarterback away from a Super Bowl run. Kansas City traded a first-round pick to the San Francisco 49ers for Joe Montana, one of the most accomplished quarterbacks in NFL history. The move was meant to bring championship experience to a franchise that had struggled to advance deep into the playoffs. The results were mixed. Montana played well when healthy, leading the Chiefs to the AFC Championship game in the 1993 season. But injuries limited his availability, and he never took Kansas City to the Super Bowl. After just 2 seasons, his run with the team was over. The trade becomes more questionable when considering the cost. That first-round pick represented a long-term building block for a roster that still lacked offensive firepower. Instead, the Chiefs invested premium draft capital in an aging quarterback whose window was extremely short. While the move energized the fan base, it didn't deliver the ultimate goal. This trade stands out not because Montana failed, but because the investment didn't align with the outcome. Kansas City paid a future-focused price for a short-term return. It remains one of the franchise's most debated trades. Not disastrous on the field, but costly in hindsight given how brief the payoff turned out to be. Las Vegas Raiders, Randy Moss trade, 2007. In 2007, the Raiders believed they were cutting ties with a player who no longer fit their direction. Las Vegas, then Oakland, traded Randy Moss to the New England Patriots for a 4th-round pick. Moss was coming off a quiet season and had clashed with the organization, leading the Raiders to believe his best football was behind him. That assessment was wildly wrong. Moss immediately exploded in New England, catching 23 touchdowns in 2007 and helping set multiple league records. He became the centerpiece of one of the most dominant offenses in NFL history and reminded the league exactly how dangerous he still was. The Raiders received minimal value in return. The 4th-round pick did nothing to change the trajectory of the franchise, while Moss helped power New England to an undefeated regular season. What makes this trade particularly painful is how quickly the mistake became obvious. Moss didn't need time to rediscover himself. He thrived instantly once placed in a functional system with an elite quarterback. Oakland misread motivation as decline. They sold a Hall of Fame talent at his lowest perceived value and watched him reach his peak somewhere else. Los Angeles Chargers, Ryan Leaf draft trade, 1998. In 1998, the Chargers believed they had secured a franchise quarterback to define the next decade. To draft Ryan Leaf, Los Angeles, then San Diego, traded a package of draft picks that included a future first-round pick and a second-round pick. The move was designed to land one of the top 2 quarterbacks in the class, and at the time, Leaf was viewed as comparable to Peyton Manning. The result was catastrophic. Leaf struggled immediately with accuracy, decision-making, and maturity. Across 3 seasons with the Chargers, he threw more interceptions than touchdowns, and became known for locker room issues as much as on-field failures. His time as a starter ended quickly, and his NFL career collapsed shortly after. The long-term cost was devastating. The Chargers didn't just miss on a quarterback. They surrendered valuable draft capital that could have stabilized the roster during a crucial rebuild. Instead, they were forced to start over almost immediately, delaying progress for years. This trade stands as one of the most infamous draft moves in league history. It combined poor evaluation, heavy investment, and a complete lack of return. Los Angeles Rams, Jerome Bettis trade, 1996. In 1996, the Rams made a move that looked logical at the time, but aged terribly. Los Angeles traded Jerome Bettis and a third-round pick to the Pittsburgh Steelers in exchange for a second-round and a fourth-round pick. The Rams believed Bettis didn't fit their offensive direction and felt his running style no longer matched what they wanted to do. They were completely wrong. Bettis went on to become the face of the Steelers' offense for a decade. He rushed for over 10,000 yards in Pittsburgh, became a perennial Pro Bowl player, won a Super Bowl, and eventually earned a spot in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. His physical style aged well, and he remained productive deep into his career. The Rams, meanwhile, got minimal return. The draft picks failed to produce players anywhere close to Bettis' impact, and the team continued to flounder offensively for years before finally rebuilding in the late 1990s. What makes this trade painful is how misjudged the evaluation was. Bettis wasn't declining. He was entering his prime. The Rams didn't just trade away a good player. They traded away a future Hall of Famer for marginal assets. Miami Dolphins, Dante Culpepper trade, 2006. In 2006, the Miami Dolphins believed they had secured their quarterback of the future. Miami traded a second-round pick to the Minnesota Vikings for Dante Culpepper, betting that he would fully recover from a major knee injury. The move was meant to bring stability and upside to a franchise searching for a long-term answer under center. The gamble failed almost immediately. Culpepper struggled with mobility and accuracy, and his knee never returned to pre-injury form. He started just 4 games for Miami before being benched. The offense stalled, and the Dolphins finished the season with one of the worst records in the league. The trade became even more painful in hindsight. That same offseason, Miami passed on Drew Brees, who went on to sign with New Orleans and become one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history. While the trade itself cost only a second-round pick, the decision symbolized a massive organizational misread. Culpepper was released after the season, and Miami was forced back into another rebuild. The quarterback search continued for years, while Brees rewrote the record books elsewhere. Minnesota Vikings, Herschel Walker trade, 1989. In 1989, the Minnesota Vikings made the most infamous trade in NFL history. Minnesota traded for Herschel Walker, believing he was the final piece to push an already strong roster into Super Bowl contention. To acquire him from the Dallas Cowboys, the Vikings sent a massive haul of players and draft picks, including multiple first-round selections. The scale of the deal was unprecedented. Minnesota gave up 5 players and 8 draft picks in total. Walker produced solid numbers, but he never elevated the offense or delivered postseason success. The Vikings reached the playoffs, but the Super Bowl push never materialized. Dallas, on the other hand, turned the draft capital into a dynasty. The Cowboys used the picks acquired from Minnesota to select cornerstone players who formed the backbone of 3 Super Bowl teams in the 1990s. What Minnesota saw as a short-term upgrade became the foundation of Dallas's dominance. This trade didn't just fail for the Vikings, it reshaped the entire league. New England Patriots, Chad Jackson draft trade, 2006. In 2006, the New England Patriots made an uncharacteristically aggressive move to address their wide receiver depth. New England traded up in the second round to draft Chad Jackson, sending additional draft capital to move ahead of other teams. Jackson was viewed as a speed threat who could stretch defenses and grow into a featured role in the offense. The plan never materialized. Jackson struggled to learn the playbook and failed to earn Tom Brady's trust. Over 2 seasons in New England, he recorded just 13 receptions for 153 yards and did not score a single touchdown. By 2008, he was already off the roster. The issue wasn't just the player, it was the process. The Patriots rarely trade up for skill position players, preferring to let value fall to them. In this case, they paid extra for a receiver who never became a contributor, turning multiple draft assets into almost nothing. While New England recovered quickly and continued winning championships, this trade stands out because it broke from their usual discipline and failed completely. New Orleans Saints, Ricky Williams draft trade, 1999. In 1999, the New Orleans Saints made one of the boldest draft day moves the league had ever seen. New Orleans traded its entire 1999 draft class and multiple picks from the 2000 draft to Washington in order to select Ricky Williams. Head coach Mike Ditka believed Williams was a generational talent and worth any price necessary. The cost was enormous. The Saints surrendered 8 draft picks in total, stripping the roster of young, affordable talent for multiple seasons. Williams produced solid numbers early, rushing for over 1,000 yards in his second season, but the team never became a true contender during his tenure. By 2002, Williams was gone. New Orleans traded him to Miami just 3 years after acquiring him, officially closing the book on the experiment. Meanwhile, Washington used the haul of draft picks to accelerate its rebuild, while the Saints were left dealing with the long-term effects of an emptied pipeline. This trade didn't fail because Williams was bad. It failed because no running back could justify that level of investment. New Orleans sacrificed roster depth, flexibility, and future planning for a single player. It remains one of the clearest examples of how overcommitment can derail an entire franchise. New York Giants, Leonard Williams trade, 2019. In 2019, the New York Giants made a move that made little sense given where the franchise stood. At 2-6, clearly in a rebuilding phase, the Giants traded a third-round pick and a conditional fourth-round pick to the New York Jets for Leonard Williams. Williams was a solid interior defender, but he was also in the final year of his contract and not considered a difference maker. The timing was the biggest issue. New York wasn't one player away from contending. They were transitioning from the Eli Manning era, breaking in Daniel Jones, and lacked depth across the roster. Trading mid-round picks for a pending free agent ran directly against rebuild logic. Williams did re-sign with the Giants and later had a strong 2020 season, but the initial trade still came at a steep cost. The draft capital could have been used to develop younger, cheaper talent during a critical roster reset. What makes this trade stand out is not that Williams was a bad player, it's that the Giants paid a premium without leverage, urgency, or a competitive window. New York Jets, Tim Tebow trade, 2012. In 2012, the New York Jets believed they could recreate lightning in a bottle. Fresh off a playoff upset in Denver, the Jets traded a fourth-round pick to acquire Tim Tebow. The move was pitched as a creative addition, a special package player who could add a new wrinkle to the offense while backing up Mark Sanchez. It turned into a disaster. The Jets never figured out how to use Tebow. He appeared in just a handful of snaps all season, rarely threw the ball, and spent most games on the sideline, while media attention followed him everywhere. The quarterback room became a constant distraction, and Sanchez's development stalled under the pressure. On the field, the results were just as bad. The Jets finished 6-10. The offense ranked near the bottom of the league, and the experiment ended after one season. Tebow was released the following offseason without ever having a defined role. The problem wasn't the price, it was the plan. New York traded for a quarterback without committing to him, without building an offense around his strengths, and without clarity on how he fit into the team's direction. The move created chaos instead of competition. Philadelphia Eagles, Kiko Alonso trade, 2015. In 2015, the Philadelphia Eagles made a move driven more by scheme obsession than roster value. Philadelphia traded LaShawn McCoy, the best offensive player on the roster, to the Buffalo Bills for linebacker Kiko Alonso. Head coach Chip Kelly believed McCoy did not fit his offense, and that Alonso would anchor the defense. The trade was immediately unbalanced. McCoy continued producing at a high level in Buffalo, remaining one of the league's most consistent running backs for years. Alonso, meanwhile, struggled to stay healthy and never found a clear role in Philadelphia's defense. He played just 11 games in one season before being traded again. The Eagles gained almost nothing from the move. Philadelphia lost its offensive identity, weakened an already struggling unit, and failed to replace McCoy's production. Alonso was gone quickly, and the defense never benefited from his presence in a meaningful way. What made the trade worse was how avoidable it was. McCoy was still in his prime, under contract, and beloved by the fan base. Philadelphia moved him not because of decline, but because of philosophy. Pittsburgh Steelers, Santonio Holmes trade, 2010. In 2010, the Pittsburgh Steelers made a decision based on risk management rather than production. Pittsburgh traded Santonio Holmes to the New York Jets for a fifth-round pick. Holmes was still in his prime and had just been named Super Bowl MVP 2 seasons earlier after delivering one of the most iconic catches in NFL history. On the field, the move was questionable. Holmes remained productive with the Jets, becoming a reliable target and continuing to contribute at a high level when healthy. Pittsburgh, meanwhile, moved forward without a proven playmaker at wide receiver and leaned heavily on a developing group of younger players. The trade was driven largely by off-field concerns and contract issues. The Steelers prioritized locker room stability and long-term control over immediate production. While Pittsburgh eventually rebuilt the position successfully, the return value was minimal. A fifth-round pick for a Super Bowl MVP-level talent represented a significant loss in pure football terms. San Francisco 49ers, O.J. Simpson trade, 1978. In 1978, the San Francisco 49ers made a move driven more by name recognition than evaluation. San Francisco traded 5 draft picks, including the first overall pick in the draft, to acquire O.J. Simpson from the Buffalo Bills. Simpson was one of the most famous players in football history, but by the time the trade was made, his best years were already behind him. The production never justified the cost. Simpson was 31 years old and clearly declining. Over 2 seasons with San Francisco, he failed to rush for 1,000 yards and never resembled the dominant back he had been earlier in his career. The 49ers did not become contenders, and the offense never revolved around him successfully. The opportunity cost was massive. The draft capital San Francisco gave up could have been used to accelerate a rebuild that was still years away. Instead, those assets were spent on a short-term fading star. The trade provided publicity, but little on-field value. Seattle Seahawks, Tony Dorsett trade rights, 1977. In 1977, the Seattle Seahawks made a decision that quietly became one of the franchise's biggest regrets. Seattle held the rights to draft Tony Dorsett, one of the most celebrated college players in history. Instead of selecting him, the Seahawks traded his draft rights to the Dallas Cowboys in exchange for future draft picks. The value never came close. Dorsett immediately became a star in Dallas, rushing for over 1,000 yards as a rookie and going on to build a Hall of Fame career. He became the face of the Cowboys' offense for years and played a major role in their sustained success. Seattle, meanwhile, failed to convert the acquired picks into comparable impact. As a young expansion franchise, they passed on a generational talent who could have anchored the offense and accelerated their development. What makes this trade painful is the clarity of hindsight. Dorsett was not a projection. He was a proven, elite talent entering the league. Seattle chose flexibility over certainty and watched a future Hall of Famer thrive elsewhere. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Darrelle Revis trade, 2013. In 2013, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers believed they were one elite defender away from turning the corner. Tampa Bay traded a first-round pick and a conditional pick to the New York Jets for Darrelle Revis, one of the most dominant cornerbacks of his era. The expectation was simple. Revis would erase one side of the field and transform the defense overnight. That transformation never happened. Revis struggled in Tampa Bay's zone-heavy scheme and never looked comfortable. His effort was questioned, his impact was minimal, and the defense did not improve. After just 1 season, the Buccaneers released him, effectively turning a first-round pick into a 1-year rental. The aftermath made the trade look even worse. Revis immediately returned to elite form after leaving Tampa Bay, signing with New England and helping the Patriots win the Super Bowl the very next season. His decline in Tampa was not permanent, it was situational. Tampa Bay misjudged fit, timing, and commitment. They paid a premium price without a long-term plan and received none of the benefits they envisioned. Tennessee Titans, Steve Largent trade, 1976. In 1976, the Houston Oilers made a decision that would echo through NFL history. Houston, now the Tennessee Titans, traded Steve Largent and a fourth-round pick to the Seattle Seahawks in exchange for an eighth-round pick. At the time, Largent was an unproven rookie and considered expendable. The evaluation couldn't have been more wrong. Largent went on to become one of the greatest wide receivers in NFL history. He retired as the league's all-time leader in receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns, and later earned a spot in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He became the cornerstone of Seattle's offense for over a decade. Houston received virtually nothing in return. The eighth-round pick had no lasting impact, while the Oilers forfeited the chance to develop a Hall of Fame talent internally. The trade became a textbook example of misjudging player development and upside. What makes this move especially painful is how little Houston received. This wasn't a calculated risk, it was a giveaway. Washington Commanders, Robert Griffin III trade, 2012. In 2012, Washington made one of the most aggressive trades in modern NFL history in pursuit of a franchise quarterback. Washington sent 3 first-round picks and a second-round pick to the St. Louis Rams to move up and draft Robert Griffin III. The move was fueled by urgency. Griffin was electric, coming off a Heisman-winning season and viewed as a transformational talent. The payoff was immediate. Griffin delivered one of the best rookie quarterback seasons the league had ever seen, leading Washington to a division title and reviving a dormant fan base. For 1 year, the trade looked justified. Then, the window closed. A devastating knee injury late in his rookie season altered his career. Washington rushed him back. The offense lost its identity, and his development stalled. By 2015, Griffin was no longer the starter, and the franchise was left without the draft capital needed to pivot quickly. The Rams, meanwhile, turned the picks into a foundation that fueled their rebuild and eventual return to contention. Washington lost years of flexibility trying to recover from the trade. Albert Haynesworth, Washington's $100 million free agency disaster. Albert Haynesworth entered the 2009 offseason as the most disruptive interior defensive lineman available. During his final years with Tennessee, he dominated the middle of the defensive line with rare power and explosiveness, earning first-team All-Pro honors in both 2007 and 2008, while regularly appearing in Defensive Player of the Year discussions. Washington believed adding that level of interior pressure could transform its defense and aggressively pursued him in free agency. The organization committed to a historic contract, agreeing to a 7-year deal worth $100 million with $41 million guaranteed, the largest defensive contract ever awarded at that time. Expectations centered on Haynesworth anchoring the defensive line and forcing constant double teams that would elevate the entire front. Instead, problems surfaced almost immediately as conditioning issues, effort concerns, and tension with the coaching staff created friction before the first season had even fully unfolded. The situation deteriorated further after a coaching change introduced a new defensive scheme that required Haynesworth to play nose tackle in a 3-4 alignment, a role he openly resisted. Public standoffs over conditioning tests, visible effort issues during games, and a viral moment where he remained on the ground while a play continued around him turned the partnership into a national embarrassment. After only 2 turbulent seasons and limited production, Washington moved on, leaving the contract widely remembered as one of the most damaging free agent investments in professional football history. Brock Osweiler, Houston's $72 million quarterback gamble. Houston entered the 2016 offseason with a roster built to compete immediately on defense, but lacking stability at quarterback. The franchise had cycled through multiple starters during the previous seasons, including Matt Schaub, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Ryan Mallett, and Brian Hoyer. After a playoff loss in which Hoyer threw 4 interceptions, management concluded the roster had reached its limit without a long-term solution under center. Brock Osweiler emerged as the target, despite limited starting experience. The former second-round pick had spent several seasons behind Peyton Manning in Denver and started 7 games during the 2015 season when Manning battled injuries. Houston committed 4 years and $72 million, with $37 million guaranteed, paying for projection rather than sustained production. The expectation centered on Osweiler stabilizing the offense while complementing a defense led by J.J. Watt. The results quickly raised concern. Accuracy issues, slow reads, and inconsistent chemistry with receivers defined much of the 2016 season, culminating in 15 touchdowns, 16 interceptions, and a 72.2 passer rating. Houston eventually benched him late in the year before briefly returning him to the lineup during the playoffs. Only one offseason later, the franchise executed an unprecedented move, sending Osweiler and a valuable second-round pick to Cleveland simply to remove the contract, turning the deal into one of the most expensive one-year quarterback experiments in league history. Nnamdi Asomugha, the collapse of Philadelphia's dream team. Nnamdi Asomugha entered the 2011 offseason with a reputation as the premier shutdown cornerback in football. During his tenure with Oakland, quarterbacks frequently avoided throwing in his direction due to his physical press coverage and ability to eliminate top receivers. Philadelphia pursued him aggressively, believing the addition would elevate an already talented roster into immediate championship contention. The organization committed $60 million over 5 years and assembled a secondary featuring Asomugha, Asante Samuel, and Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie. The concentration of star power generated enormous hype during training camp, amplified when quarterback Vince Young famously labeled the roster the Dream Team. Expectations soared as observers anticipated one of the most dominant defensive backfields in the league. Reality unfolded differently. Philadelphia's defensive structure required far more zone coverage than the press-man system where Asomugha had thrived, placing him in responsibilities that limited his strengths. Communication breakdowns and inconsistent coverage plagued the secondary throughout the season, and the roster failed to meet expectations, finishing with an 8-8 record. Within 2 seasons, the experiment ended quietly when the organization released Asomugha, turning what began as a headline acquisition into a widely cited example of how elite talent can falter in the wrong system. Le'Veon Bell, a star runner and a misaligned offense. When New York entered the 2019 offseason, the organization wanted a player who could stabilize a young offense built around quarterback Sam Darnold. Le'Veon Bell carried the reputation of the most versatile running back of his era, known for his patience as a runner, strong receiving ability, and reliability in pass protection. After sitting out the entire 2018 season during a contract dispute in Pittsburgh, he entered the market as the most recognizable offensive weapon available. The franchise committed 4 years and more than $50 million to make Bell the centerpiece of the offense. Expectations focused on his ability to control tempo while providing a safety outlet for a developing quarterback. Instead, the environment around him limited his effectiveness. A struggling offensive line collapsed running lanes, the passing game lacked consistent threats, and the system under head coach Adam Gase rarely placed Bell in the space-oriented roles that had previously produced his greatest success. Production never matched the investment. Bell accumulated touches but rarely generated explosive plays, and the offense continued to stall throughout the season. As frustration mounted, the partnership deteriorated quickly, leading to his release during the 2020 season. A move designed to reshape the offense instead turned into a costly reminder that even elite talent requires the right surrounding structure. Antonio Brown, Oakland's superstar acquisition that never played. Oakland attempted to transform its offense during the 2019 offseason by acquiring Antonio Brown, a receiver whose production in Pittsburgh had placed him among the most dominant pass catchers of the decade. The organization envisioned him elevating Derek Carr's passing attack while providing star power during a transitional period for the franchise. Expectations centered on immediate offensive impact from a player who had consistently produced elite numbers. Before the season even started, The situation spiraled into a series of escalating disputes. Brown challenged the league's updated helmet regulations, filed grievances over equipment restrictions, and missed significant practice time while the standoff unfolded. A cryotherapy accident that damaged his feet and escalating conflicts with team leadership created continuous turmoil. Public disagreements eventually made the partnership unsustainable. As tensions increased, the organization issued fines for conduct detrimental to the franchise after a confrontation involving management. Those penalties triggered the voiding of millions in guaranteed money, prompting Brown to request his release publicly. The organization granted that request within hours, ending the partnership before he played a regular season snap. What had been designed as a headline offensive addition instead collapsed during the offseason, leaving behind a chaotic episode remembered more for controversy than football. Trumaine Johnson, a record contract that failed to stabilize the secondary. New York's defense entered the 2018 offseason searching for a cornerback capable of handling elite receivers while strengthening the secondary. Trumaine Johnson had built a reputation in Los Angeles for physical coverage and strong ball skills, often matching up against top wideouts in the Rams' defensive structure. After playing 2 seasons under the franchise tag, he entered free agency positioned for a long-term contract. The Jets responded with a 5-year agreement worth more than $72 million, the largest defensive back contract in franchise history at the time. Expectations centered on Johnson anchoring the secondary while creating turnovers and providing stability against opposing passing attacks. Injuries soon disrupted that plan, including recurring quadriceps issues that limited his availability during the first season. Performance declined as well. Opposing quarterbacks targeted him more frequently, big plays increased, and his interception production dropped sharply. Frustration grew inside the organization as coaches questioned consistency and effort. 2 years after the contract began, the franchise released Johnson while carrying substantial dead money on the salary cap, closing a costly chapter that delivered little return on investment. Nate Solder, record money for stability that never materialized. New York entered the 2018 offseason confronting a major protection problem. The offensive line had collapsed during the previous year, exposing quarterback Eli Manning to constant pressure and limiting any consistent rushing attack. With a new general manager attempting to restore competitiveness quickly, leadership prioritized securing a veteran left tackle capable of stabilizing the most critical position on the line. Nate Solder stood out because of his long tenure protecting Tom Brady in New England and his experience during multiple championship runs. The organization committed 4 years and $62 million, with more than $34 million guaranteed, briefly making Solder the highest-paid left tackle in professional football. Expectations centered on blindside protection for Manning and long-term stability for the entire line. Instead, edge rushers began beating him regularly during his first season, exposing issues with balance and recovery speed that allowed pressure to reach the quarterback from the exact side he had been brought in to secure. As the roster transitioned toward rookie quarterback Daniel Jones the following year, Solder's role became even more important, yet protection problems continued. Personal hardship also shaped this period, as his young son underwent cancer treatment, forcing Solder to balance football responsibilities with family priorities. He later opted out of the 2020 season due to health concerns related to the pandemic, and when he returned, his role had diminished. A contract designed to repair the offensive line ultimately delivered far less stability than the franchise expected. Byron Maxwell, from Legion of Boom contributor to Philadelphia disappointment. Philadelphia sought a physical cornerback during the 2015 offseason after years of inconsistent pass coverage. The defense struggled to contain elite receivers, and leadership believed a bigger press coverage defender could reshape the secondary. Byron Maxwell had built his reputation within Seattle's dominant defensive unit, starting opposite Richard Sherman, and contributing to a championship run that showcased the strength of the Legion of Boom era. The Eagles committed 6 years and $63 million, with $25 million guaranteed, expecting Maxwell to operate as the defense's primary coverage corner. His reputation grew largely within Seattle's structured system that relied on elite safety support and a powerful pass rush. In Philadelphia, he entered a far different environment, one that required him to handle difficult assignments without the same level of support behind him. Opposing offenses quickly recognized the difference and targeted Maxwell aggressively. Quick receivers created separation, and deep routes exposed limitations in recovery speed, turning him into a focal point for passing attacks rather than a defender to avoid. The defense struggled throughout the season and finished with a losing record, leading to sweeping changes that included the departure of the head coach. Only 1 year after the contract began, Maxwell was traded away to Miami, making the investment one of the shortest major free agent experiments of that era. DeMarco Murray, the rushing champion who never fit Philadelphia's system. Fresh off a historic rushing season in Dallas, DeMarco Murray entered free agency in 2015 with extraordinary momentum. He had led the league with more than 1,800 rushing yards while powering the Cowboys' offense behind a dominant offensive line. Philadelphia pursued him aggressively during an offseason focused on strengthening a fast-paced attack that relied heavily on the ground game. The idea carried additional intrigue because the acquisition pulled a star runner away from a division rival. The agreement totaled $42 million across 5 years, with $21 million guaranteed, placing Murray among the highest-paid running backs at the time. His previous success had come through downhill running concepts, where blockers created direct lanes toward the line of scrimmage. Philadelphia's offense, however, emphasized zone running that required lateral movement and patience while blocks developed, a style that did not align with Murray's strengths. Production dropped immediately as defenders reached him in the backfield before momentum could build. The offense also rotated multiple running backs, limiting rhythm and fueling frustration about his role. After leading the league in rushing the year before, Murray finished with barely 700 yards as the offense failed to establish a consistent identity. Following a disappointing season that ended with the firing of the head coach, the organization traded Murray after only 1 year. Javon Walker, Oakland's expensive receiver, gamble that produced almost nothing. Oakland entered the 2008 offseason searching for explosive offense as the franchise attempted to rebuild around newly drafted quarterback Jamarcus Russell. After several losing seasons and constant roster turnover, ownership wanted a recognizable playmaker capable of stretching defenses and giving the young quarterback a reliable downfield target. Javon Walker carried that reputation after earlier success in Green Bay and Denver, where his speed and route running had produced major receiving seasons and established him as a dangerous vertical threat. The organization committed 6 years and $55 million, with $16 million guaranteed, expecting Walker to anchor the receiving group and elevate a struggling passing attack. Circumstances quickly undermined that plan. Prior knee injuries had already limited his durability, and shortly after arriving, he endured a traumatic assault in Las Vegas that left him physically injured and emotionally shaken. Those factors combined with ongoing health issues dramatically reduced his availability during the season. Production collapsed almost immediately. Walker finished his first year in Oakland with only 15 receptions and fewer than 200 receiving yards, while the offense remained among the weakest in the league. The following season brought even less involvement as injuries persisted and his role shrank to only a handful of catches. After 2 years with minimal impact, the organization released him, leaving the contract remembered as another costly attempt to buy star power during a turbulent rebuilding period. Ndamukong Suh, Miami's record defensive contract with limited team impact. Miami entered the 2015 offseason believing the roster was close to competing in the conference. The previous season ended with an even record and flashes of defensive potential, yet leadership felt the unit lacked an interior presence capable of consistently disrupting quarterbacks. Ndamukong Suh represented that opportunity. During his time in Detroit, he had built a reputation as one of the most physically imposing defensive linemen in football, combining raw power with relentless effort while collecting major accolades and league-wide recognition. The Dolphins responded with a historic commitment, agreeing to a 6-year contract worth $114 million, with $60 million guaranteed. The deal instantly reset the defensive market and placed enormous expectations on Sue to dominate offensive lines while elevating the entire front. Individually, he remained productive, continuing to collapse pockets and occupy multiple blockers, but the broader defensive transformation Miami envisioned never fully materialized. Several factors prevented the investment from producing the desired results. Coaching changes disrupted continuity, defensive performance fluctuated, and the enormous contract placed pressure on roster building across the salary cap. Miami reached the playoffs once during his tenure, but never established the dominant defense ownership had imagined when the deal was signed. After 3 seasons, the franchise released Sue primarily to regain financial flexibility, illustrating how even productive play can fall short of expectations attached to record-breaking contracts. Jimmy Graham. Seattle acquires a star tight end and alters its offense. Seattle entered the 2015 offseason as a recent champion with an identity built on defense, physical rushing, and the improvisational ability of quarterback Russell Wilson. Despite reaching consecutive championship games, the passing attack lacked a consistent matchup weapon capable of dominating coverage in critical situations. Jimmy Graham offered that profile after years of elite production in New Orleans, where his size and receiving ability had turned him into one of the most dangerous red zone threats in the league. Seattle acquired him through a trade that sent center Max Unger and a first-round draft selection to New Orleans, while also absorbing the remaining years of a large contract. The acquisition created excitement because Graham's previous role resembled a wide receiver operating from the tight end position. In New Orleans, he thrived within a pass-heavy structure that designed routes specifically to isolate him against defenders. Seattle's offense followed a very different philosophy, centered on power running and play action, meaning tight ends often handled significant blocking duties rather than serving as primary targets. Just as Graham began adjusting to the new system, a torn patellar tendon ended his 2015 season and severely complicated the experiment. He returned the following year and remained an effective scoring threat near the goal line, yet the explosive mobility that once defined his game had diminished. Seattle's offense never fully reshaped itself around his strengths, and after the 2017 season, he departed in free agency. The partnership produced moments of success, but ultimately illustrated the difficulty of integrating a specialized weapon into a system built around entirely different priorities. Mike Wallace. Miami pays for speed and gets an offense that cannot use it. Miami entered the 2013 offseason focused on accelerating the development of quarterback Ryan Tannehill after a rookie year that showed promise but limited explosiveness. The passing game lacked a receiver capable of stretching coverage, allowing defenses to crowd the line and compress the field. Mike Wallace appeared to solve that problem instantly. During his years in Pittsburgh, he had developed a reputation as a premier vertical threat whose straight-line speed forced defensive coordinators to allocate safety help deep. The Dolphins committed 5 years and $60 million, with $30 million guaranteed, expecting Wallace to become Tannehill's primary target, while opening space across the entire offense. Instead, the structure around him prevented those expectations from materializing. Miami's offensive line struggled severely in pass protection, and Tannehill absorbed constant pressure throughout the season. Deep routes required time for receivers to reach full depth, yet the quarterback rarely had that time available. Although Wallace still produced respectable yardage totals, the explosive downfield connection the organization envisioned rarely appeared. Timing between quarterback and receiver fluctuated. The offense shifted inconsistently between short passing and vertical concepts, and the surrounding instability prevented a clear offensive identity from forming. After 2 seasons, the Dolphins moved on through a trade, leaving the investment remembered as an example of how speed alone cannot transform an offense without protection and structural stability. Nick Foles. Jacksonville's Super Bowl hero experiment ends quickly. Jacksonville entered the 2019 offseason, believing its defense remained strong enough to compete if the offense could stabilize the quarterback position. 2 seasons earlier, the franchise had reached the conference championship game behind a dominant defense, but struggled with inconsistent play from Blake Bortles. Nick Foles entered free agency carrying enormous credibility after leading Philadelphia through a remarkable postseason run that ended with a championship and a Super Bowl Most Valuable Player performance. The Jaguars committed 4 years and $88 million with major guarantees, signaling a full commitment to the veteran quarterback as the new leader of the offense. That plan unraveled almost immediately. During the opening game of the season, Foles threw a touchdown pass before absorbing a heavy hit that resulted in a broken clavicle. The injury forced him out of the lineup before the first quarter had even finished. While Foles recovered, rookie Gardner Minshew unexpectedly energized the offense and quickly gained support from fans and coaches. When Foles returned later in the season, the rhythm established by the rookie disappeared and the offense stalled. Coaches soon restored Minshew as the starter, leaving the expensive acquisition without a clear role. Within a year, Jacksonville traded Foles to Chicago, turning what was supposed to be a stabilizing investment into one of the shortest quarterback experiments of the era. J.C. Jackson. Los Angeles pays for an interception machine, and the fit falls apart. Los Angeles entered the 2022 offseason believing the roster had championship potential around quarterback Justin Herbert, but needed defensive playmakers capable of creating turnovers. J.C. Jackson appeared to fill that role after building a reputation in New England as a cornerback with exceptional ball skills. During his final seasons there, he recorded more interceptions than any defender in the league, often baiting quarterbacks into mistakes through anticipation and aggressive coverage. The Chargers committed 5 years and more than $80 million with $40 million guaranteed, expecting Jackson to anchor the secondary while generating takeaways. Problems surfaced before the regular season began when an ankle injury required surgery and limited his preparation within the defensive system. Adjusting to a new scheme proved difficult, especially because Los Angeles relied heavily on zone principles that restricted the aggressive ball-hunting style that had fueled his success previously. Early struggles followed, and just as he began showing signs of improvement, a torn patellar tendon ended his season. The injury required a long recovery and disrupted the partnership before it could stabilize. When he returned the following year, confidence between player and coaching staff had eroded, and his role diminished significantly. Within 2 seasons, the Chargers traded him back to New England, closing a costly experiment driven by a miscalculation about scheme compatibility. Chandler Jones, Las Vegas, replaces a pass rusher and gets chaos instead. Las Vegas entered the 2022 offseason determined to strengthen its pass rush after leadership changes brought a new coaching staff and front office. The organization wanted a veteran edge defender to pair with Max Crosby and believed Chandler Jones offered exactly that presence. Across earlier stops in New England and Arizona, he had accumulated more than 100 career sacks while consistently ranking among the league's most productive pass rushers. The Raiders committed 3 years and more than $50 million with substantial guarantees, expecting Jones to deliver immediate pressure opposite Crosby. Instead, the beginning of his tenure featured an unusually quiet stretch as several weeks passed without sacks or consistent disruption. Although his production improved slightly later in the season, the impact never matched the expectations attached to the contract. The following year, the relationship collapsed publicly after a series of social media posts criticizing the organization and raising concerns about his situation with the franchise. The conflict escalated quickly, and the Raiders eventually placed him on the non-football illness list before releasing him shortly afterward. A deal designed to build a dominant edge tandem ended after barely more than a season, illustrating how quickly high-profile acquisitions can unravel when performance and organizational stability collide. Adalius Thomas, a versatile defender and a system that demanded more than talent. Following the 2006 season, New England sought additional flexibility along its defensive front. The coaching staff prioritized players capable of shifting responsibilities between pass rush, coverage, and interior pressure, depending on weekly matchups. Adalius Thomas appeared perfectly suited for that role after several productive years in Baltimore, where his athleticism and football intelligence allowed him to line up at multiple linebacker spots while contributing consistent pressure on quarterbacks. The organization committed 5 years and $35 million, with $20 million guaranteed, expecting Thomas to serve as a movable chess piece within a complex defensive structure. Early results suggested the plan might succeed. During the 2007 season, New England completed a perfect regular season, and Thomas contributed across several alignments, while the defense complemented an historically productive offense. Over time, internal tension developed as expectations within the defensive structure intensified. Reports later indicated disagreements regarding responsibilities and preparation within the scheme, eventually leading to disciplinary actions that included multiple inactive designations late in the partnership. After 3 seasons, the organization released Thomas, turning a promising acquisition into an example of how even talented players can struggle within systems that demand constant adaptability and strict adherence to assignments. Robert Quinn. Chicago pays for a second edge threat, and the results whiplash. Chicago entered the 2020 offseason trying to preserve a defensive formula that had carried the roster through its best stretch of the late 2000s. Khalil Mack remained the centerpiece, but protection plans had shifted toward constantly sliding his way, using chips, tight end assistance, and quick throws to reduce his impact. The front office wanted a second edge rusher who could punish offenses for overcommitting to Mack, turning protection into a lose-lose choice and restoring the kind of pressure that forces mistakes. Robert Quinn looked like the right profile for that role. His peak seasons in Los Angeles showcased rare speed and bend, and his 2019 year in Dallas reinforced that he still had juice as a finisher. Chicago rewarded that resume with a 5-year deal worth $70 million and $30 million guaranteed, expecting steady disruption opposite Mack and a pass rush that could close games without blitzing. The first season in Chicago landed like a shock. Quinn struggled to affect the pocket consistently and finished 2020 with 2 sacks, a number that felt impossible for a player paid to win one-on-ones. Whether it was injuries, fit, or timing, the intended impact never appeared, and the defense got far less return than the contract implied. Then the story flipped in 2021, when Quinn produced an 18.5 sack season that set a franchise record, creating a bizarre contrast between a near-zero opening act and an explosive rebound. That swing never turned into long-term stability. Chicago soon tilted toward a rebuild, and Quinn moved to Philadelphia during the 2022 season, leaving the contract defined by volatility instead of dependable value. The takeaway is not that Quinn could not rush the passer, but that even premium edge investments can produce unpredictable year-to-year outcomes that make planning difficult. Allen Robinson. A championship offense adds a name and the role never forms. Los Angeles entered the 2022 offseason fresh off a title run with a clear priority: keep defenses from tilting everything toward Cooper Kupp. Matthew Stafford had a trusted partnership with Kupp, but the front office wanted a second outside threat who could win contested targets, punish single coverage, and keep the passing game from narrowing when opponents bracketed the star. Allen Robinson fit the idea on paper because his best seasons came in difficult circumstances, producing through tight windows and inconsistent quarterback play. The Rams committed 3 years and $46.5 million, expecting Robinson to operate as a reliable secondary option with red zone value and chain-moving consistency. What followed was not a slow learning curve, but an environment collapse. Injuries and instability hit the offense, protection broke down, and Stafford missed time, which drained structure from the passing game and limited the kind of timing routes that help a new receiver settle into a system. Robinson's numbers reflected that chaos rather than a clean evaluation of his talent. He finished with 33 catches for 339 yards and 3 touchdowns, far below the usage implied by the contract, and far below the need created by defenses focusing on Kupp. The offense, previously built on rhythm and play action, drifted into survival mode with limited continuity week to week, which made it hard for any complementary receiver to establish a defined lane. After one season, Los Angeles traded Robinson to Pittsburgh, essentially admitting the plan never took shape. Russell Wilson. Denver trades for a star quarterback, and the offense breaks down fast. Denver spent the years after Peyton Manning searching for quarterback stability while building rosters that looked competitive everywhere else. By the time the 2022 offseason arrived, the front office considered the position the missing piece and chose a dramatic solution by trading for Russell Wilson. The move carried enormous expectations because Wilson's Seattle years featured playoff runs, elite deep passing, and consistent late-game playmaking, creating the impression that Denver was buying instant legitimacy. The Broncos paid the price in assets and then doubled down with a massive extension, 5 years, $245 million, with guaranteed $165 million, committing to Wilson as the face of the offense before he had taken a regular season snap for the franchise. The plan relied on a quick fit with a new staff and a supporting cast that could translate his strengths immediately. Instead, the offense looked disjointed, struggling with timing, protection, and communication, and repeatedly failing to convert drives into points. What made the collapse feel harsher was how persistent it was. Denver lost close games while scoring remained low, late-game execution broke down, and national scrutiny intensified as the disconnect between expectations and output widened. Coaching pressure grew until the organization fired Nathaniel Hackett before the season ended, a rare mid-season admission that the approach was not working. The first year ended as a warning about how hard it is to transplant quarterback success across systems and circumstances. Denver had expected an instant offensive upgrade and a return to contention. Instead, the season exposed how quickly a bold acquisition can turn into a franchise-wide reset when the scheme, rhythm, and personnel ecosystem do not align. Junior Galette. Washington signs a pass rusher, and the experiment ends before it begins. Washington entered the 2015 offseason searching for edge pressure that could elevate a defense that had struggled to consistently disrupt opposing quarterbacks. The roster lacked a reliable pass rusher capable of forcing offenses into protection adjustments, and the front office targeted Junior Galette after his productive seasons with New Orleans. Galette had built a reputation as an explosive edge defender whose speed off the line created frequent backfield penetration. His recent production suggested he could provide exactly what Washington needed. During the 2013 and 2014 seasons in New Orleans, he recorded a combined 22 sacks while demonstrating strong burst around the edge and the ability to chase plays from the backside. Those performances placed him among the more dangerous young pass rushers in football and convinced Washington that he could become a centerpiece of the defensive front. Washington signed Galette to a one-year deal in 2015 with the expectation that he would immediately compete for a major role in the pass rush rotation. Before the regular season began, however, the plan collapsed when Galette suffered a torn Achilles during training camp. The injury ended his season instantly and removed the player the defense had hoped would generate consistent pressure. The organization attempted the experiment again the following year with another short-term contract, hoping Galette could recover and finally contribute. Instead, he suffered another Achilles tear during training camp in 2016, ending his season before it began for the second consecutive year. Washington released him soon afterward, leaving the signing remembered as a rare situation where injuries erased the entire opportunity before the player could appear in a single regular season game. Percy Harvin. Buffalo trades for a dynamic weapon, and the impact never appears. Buffalo entered the 2014 season looking for explosive offensive playmakers who could accelerate a developing attack built around speed and versatility. Percy Harvin had already demonstrated the kind of dynamic ability that defensive coordinators struggled to contain. His career included electrifying plays as both a receiver and return specialist, with quick acceleration that allowed him to turn short touches into long gains. Harvin had produced some of the most versatile seasons in the league during his earlier years in Minnesota, and later played a role in Seattle's championship run. His ability to line up across multiple positions created the type of unpredictability offenses covet when attempting to manufacture space. Buffalo believed adding that level of versatility could stretch opposing defenses horizontally and create easier opportunities for the passing game. In October 2014, the Bills traded a mid-round draft pick to acquire Harvin from Seattle, hoping his presence would provide an immediate offensive spark. The expectation centered on quick passes, jet motion, and design touches that would maximize his speed in open space. Despite those plans, Harvin's impact remained limited, as injuries and offensive inconsistency prevented the coaching staff from fully integrating him into the scheme. Harvin finished the season with modest production that fell far short of the excitement surrounding the trade. The following offseason, Buffalo released him, ending the partnership after only a brief tenure. What looked like a move for a versatile playmaker ultimately illustrated how difficult it can be to integrate a specialty weapon when offensive stability and continuity never fully develop. Wes Welker. Denver adds a slot specialist, and concussions cut the run short. Denver entered the 2013 offseason already possessing one of the most explosive passing attacks in football. Quarterback Peyton Manning had revitalized the offense, and the receiving group already included deep threat Demaryius Thomas and precise route runner Eric Decker. The front office believed the final element needed to make the unit even more difficult to defend was an elite slot receiver who could dominate short and intermediate routes. Wes Welker had built his reputation in New England as the most productive slot receiver of his generation. His quickness, route precision, and ability to read defensive coverage allowed him to thrive in timing-based passing systems. For years, he had been the centerpiece of high-volume offenses, consistently producing massive reception totals while converting crucial third downs. Denver signed Welker to a 2-year contract worth $12 million, expecting his chemistry with Manning to immediately elevate an already dangerous passing attack. Early results suggested the partnership could become unstoppable. Welker caught 10 touchdown passes during the 2013 season and played an important role in the offense that set numerous scoring records while reaching the Super Bowl. Unfortunately, repeated concussions began to overshadow his production. Several head injuries during the 2013 and 2014 seasons raised growing concerns about his long-term health and availability. Although he continued contributing when healthy, the accumulation of injuries limited his role and shortened his tenure in Denver, turning what initially looked like a perfect offensive addition into a partnership defined as much by medical concerns as by on-field success. Olivier Vernon. The Giants reset the pass rush and the investment struggles to deliver. New York entered the 2016 offseason determined to rebuild a defense that had slipped far below its traditional standards. The pass rush lacked consistency, and the organization believed that adding a disruptive edge defender could change the entire structure of the unit. Olivier Vernon had quietly developed into an effective pass rusher in Miami, showing the ability to pressure quarterbacks with both speed and strength. Vernon's production with the Dolphins included multiple seasons of steady pressure totals and strong run defense along the edge. Although he had not yet reached superstar recognition, evaluators valued his durability and balanced skill set. The Giants viewed him as a foundational piece capable of anchoring the defensive front for years to come. New York signed Vernon to a massive 5-year contract worth $85 million, with over $50 million guaranteed, briefly making him the highest-paid defensive end in football. The expectation centered on Vernon becoming the centerpiece of a revitalized defense and delivering consistent pressure against opposing quarterbacks. While Vernon remained a solid contributor, the production rarely matched the financial commitment attached to the deal. He generated respectable sack totals and strong effort in run defense, yet the overall impact fell short of the transformative effect the organization had envisioned. After 3 seasons, the Giants traded him to Cleveland, closing a costly chapter that illustrated how even productive players can struggle to justify record-setting contracts. Aqib Talib, talent in Tampa Bay, and a relationship that could not stabilize. Tampa Bay selected Aqib Talib in the first round of the 2008 draft and quickly saw flashes of exceptional cornerback play. His physical coverage, strong ball skills, and willingness to challenge receivers produced several seasons with impressive interception totals. Within a short time, he developed a reputation as a defender capable of shifting momentum through turnovers and aggressive coverage along the perimeter. Despite those performances, repeated off-field incidents and disciplinary issues created ongoing tension with the organization. Legal problems and suspensions generated uncertainty around a player the defense relied upon heavily. Coaches and executives faced a difficult decision about building the secondary around a talent whose availability and focus occasionally came into question. By 2012, the strain had reached a point where a long-term partnership no longer appeared sustainable. Tampa Bay traded Talib to New England during the season, ending a complicated tenure defined by both elite playmaking and recurring controversy. His later success elsewhere confirmed his talent remained intact, yet his early years with the Buccaneers illustrate how instability away from the field can reshape a franchise's long-term plans. Kenny Golladay. New York invests in a primary target and production disappears. Entering the 2021 offseason, the Giants sought a receiver capable of transforming a passing attack that lacked explosiveness. Quarterback Daniel Jones had shown flashes of ability, but needed a consistent target capable of winning contested catches and stretching coverage vertically. Kenny Golladay appeared suited for that responsibility after productive seasons in Detroit highlighted by deep receptions and strong performances in jump ball situations. New York committed 4 years and $72 million, with $40 million guaranteed, expecting Golladay to function as the focal point of the passing game. Early progress stalled during training camp when a hamstring injury limited preparation and prevented consistent timing development with the quarterback. Missing those repetitions proved costly within a new offensive structure that required precise coordination between receivers and passers. When the regular season began, production remained far below expectations. Receptions were limited, explosive plays rarely appeared, and the end zone remained elusive despite the significant investment. A coaching change the following year further reduced his role as the offense shifted toward different personnel usage. After 2 seasons, the Giants released him while absorbing substantial salary cap consequences, closing a contract that produced almost no offensive impact. Matt Flynn, a free agent quarterback and an unexpected rookie revolution. Seattle entered the 2012 offseason still searching for stability under center. Pete Carroll had built a defense-oriented roster and a physical running attack, yet the quarterback position lacked long-term clarity after seasons rotating between Tarvaris Jackson and Charlie Whitehurst. Matt Flynn suddenly appeared to offer a solution following rare appearances in Green Bay that suggested untapped potential. Interest intensified after Flynn produced an extraordinary performance during the 2011 season finale, throwing for 480 yards and 6 touchdowns. Seattle responded with a 3-year contract worth $26 million, with $10 million guaranteed, positioning him as the leading candidate to guide the offense. The investment indicated that leadership expected him to take control of the starting role. Training camp introduced an unexpected development. Third-round rookie Russell Wilson began outperforming the veteran during practices and preseason games, displaying poise, mobility, and precise decision-making. Coaches ultimately named Wilson the starter before the season began, leaving Flynn without a regular season start. Although the financial gamble did not produce the intended starter, the competition indirectly revealed the quarterback who would lead Seattle to championship success. T.J. Houshmandzadeh, a proven receiver and an offense without stability. Seattle pursued receiving help during the 2009 offseason while attempting to rebuild an offense that had struggled to sustain drives the previous year. The roster lacked a dependable target capable of consistently converting critical downs. T.J. Houshmandzadeh entered free agency after productive seasons in Cincinnati, where his precise route running and reliable hands made him a central figure in the passing attack. The Seahawks committed 5 years and $40 million with $15 million guaranteed, expecting him to operate as the primary receiving option. His skill set centered on possession receiving rather than deep speed, which meant success depended heavily on timing between quarterback and receiver. That connection proved difficult to establish within an offense dealing with constant disruption. Quarterback rotation between Matt Hasselbeck and Seneca Wallace interrupted continuity, while the offensive philosophy shifted during coaching changes. Although Houshmandzadeh recorded respectable reception totals, the overall attack lacked rhythm and struggled to generate scoring opportunities. After only 1 season, the organization released him as a new coaching staff reshaped the roster, closing a brief partnership shaped by instability. Edgerrin James, a Hall of Fame runner in a difficult environment. Arizona sought offensive balance entering the 2006 offseason while attempting to strengthen a roster that had long struggled to establish consistency. The passing attack featured rising star Larry Fitzgerald, yet the ground game lacked a dominant presence capable of controlling tempo. Edgerrin James appeared capable of providing that stability after a decorated career in Indianapolis, where his patience, vision, and versatility produced elite rushing numbers. The Cardinals secured him through a 4-year contract worth $30 million with $15 million guaranteed. Expectations centered on anchoring the rushing attack while easing pressure on the passing game. Instead, he entered a drastically different environment from the structured blocking schemes that had supported his earlier success. Run blocking inconsistency frequently placed defenders in the backfield before James could build momentum, limiting explosive gains and reducing efficiency. A mid-season benching during his first year reflected frustration within the offense, even though his final statistics remained respectable. Later seasons brought a surprising twist as Arizona eventually reached the Super Bowl, with James contributing in a reduced role. David Boston, a dominant receiver whose opportunity vanishes before it begins. San Diego attempted to strengthen its offense in 2003 while searching for a reliable target to support quarterback Drew Brees. The roster lacked a physically dominant wide receiver capable of challenging defenders on contested catches. David Boston appeared capable of filling that role after impressive seasons in Arizona, where his size, strength, and athleticism produced extraordinary receiving totals. The Chargers responded with a 7-year contract worth roughly $47 million, expecting him to lead the passing attack. Anticipation surrounding the acquisition quickly faded during training camp when Boston suffered a severe knee injury that required surgery. In particular, he tore his patella tendon in training camp 2003. The injury forced him to miss the entire season before he could appear in a regular season game for the team. Subsequent issues further complicated the situation when he later received a suspension related to the league's performance-enhancing drug policy. With availability uncertain and the roster evolving, San Diego decided to release him before he produced meaningful contributions. Andre Rison, a star receiver lost inside organizational turmoil. Cleveland pursued Andre Rison during the mid-1990s while attempting to strengthen an offense that needed explosive playmaking. Rison had already established a reputation as a productive receiver capable of creating separation and scoring frequently. His route running and acceleration made him a natural focal point for a passing attack seeking reliability. The Browns committed significant financial resources, expecting him to become the centerpiece of their offense. Shortly afterward, the franchise faced an unprecedented crisis when ownership announced plans to relocate the organization to Baltimore. The decision triggered massive backlash from supporters and placed the entire season under constant public scrutiny. Amid protests, declining attendance, and continuous media attention, maintaining stability inside the locker room proved extremely difficult. Although Rison remained capable of productive performances, the surrounding chaos prevented the offense from developing consistent success. His tenure in Cleveland ended during that turbulent period, illustrating how external organizational upheaval can overshadow even high-profile roster additions. Darius Hayward-Bay. Indianapolis signs a former first-round pick, and the opportunity fades quickly. Indianapolis entered the 2013 offseason focused on accelerating the development of quarterback Andrew Luck after a promising rookie campaign. The offense had shown flashes of explosiveness, but lacked consistent vertical speed on the outside. The front office believed adding a receiver capable of stretching defenses could open space underneath for the rest of the passing attack and create more downfield opportunities. Darius Hayward-Bay carried that reputation when he reached free agency. A former top 10 draft selection, he possessed rare straight-line speed that had once made him one of the most intriguing athletic prospects at the position. Although his early career with Oakland had been inconsistent, he had still demonstrated the ability to threaten defenses vertically and occasionally produce big plays when given room to accelerate. Indianapolis signed Hayward-Bay to a one-year contract with the expectation that his speed could complement the existing receiving group and create favorable matchups in the passing game. The idea centered on forcing defenses to respect deep routes, while Luck attacked intermediate windows elsewhere on the field. Instead, the connection between quarterback and receiver never fully developed, and Hayward-Bay struggled to secure a consistent role within the offense. His production remained limited throughout the season, and he finished the year with modest numbers that failed to justify the expectations attached to the signing. With younger receivers emerging and the offense evolving in different directions, Indianapolis allowed him to leave after the season. What had been envisioned as a vertical weapon ultimately turned into a brief experiment that never gained traction. Jevon Kearse. Philadelphia brings back a former star, but the second chapter cannot recapture the past. Philadelphia's defense had relied heavily on speed and athletic pass rushers during the early 2000s, and Jevon Kearse had once embodied that philosophy perfectly. During his initial tenure with the Eagles earlier in the decade, his explosive edge presence created serious problems for opposing offensive lines. Injuries and roster turnover eventually ended that first chapter, but the memory of his disruptive ability remained strong within the organization. Years later, the Eagles chose to bring Kearse back, hoping the veteran could provide experience, depth, and occasional pass rushing pressure. His earlier career with Tennessee had established him as one of the most dynamic defensive rookies ever, earning the nickname The Freak because of his rare athletic traits. Even though his prime years had passed, Philadelphia believed a reunion could still provide useful production along the defensive front. The second stint began with optimism, but quickly revealed how difficult it is to recapture earlier dominance. Age and accumulated injuries had reduced the explosiveness that once defined Kearse's game. Instead of overwhelming offensive tackles with speed around the edge, he struggled to consistently create separation or generate the same level of backfield disruption. Philadelphia soon transitioned toward younger pass rushers, while Kearse's role diminished. The reunion ended quietly, remembered more as a nostalgic attempt to revisit earlier success than a meaningful defensive upgrade. His earlier accomplishments remained impressive, yet the second chapter demonstrated how rarely veteran reunions recreate the impact of the original era. Josh Norman. Washington pays for a shutdown corner and the defense never stabilizes. The opportunity to acquire Josh Norman emerged suddenly during the 2016 offseason when Carolina made the unexpected decision to withdraw his franchise tag. Norman had just completed an exceptional season that placed him among the most talked about defensive players in football. His aggressive coverage style and emotional intensity helped power Carolina's dominant defense during its run to the Super Bowl. Washington moved quickly, offering a 5-year contract worth $75 million with $50 million guaranteed. At the time, it represented one of the largest financial commitments ever made to a cornerback. The organization expected Norman to anchor the secondary, challenge elite receivers across the field, and elevated defense that had struggled to consistently contain opposing passing attacks. Early moments of strong play suggested the investment might deliver the desired impact, but maintaining that level proved difficult. The defensive system in Washington differed from the structure that had supported Norman's success in Carolina, placing him in coverage situations that did not always maximize his physical press style. As seasons passed, opposing offenses targeted him more frequently, and the consistency that once defined his play began to fade. By 2020, the organization decided to move on before the final year of his contract. While Norman produced flashes of the competitiveness that had defined his peak, the defense never transformed the way Washington had envisioned when the deal was signed. Mike Glennon. Chicago pays starting quarterback money and turns to a rookie within weeks. Chicago entered the 2017 offseason attempting to stabilize a quarterback position that had cycled through multiple starters in previous years. The organization wanted a veteran capable of running the offense while the roster continued rebuilding. Mike Glennon had spent several seasons in Tampa Bay and still carried intrigue as a former starter with size and arm strength, despite limited recent playing time. The Bears signed Glennon to a 3-year contract worth $45 million, with roughly $18.5 million guaranteed, signaling that he would open the season as the starting quarterback. The plan appeared straightforward. Glennon would guide the offense while a young quarterback developed behind him. Shortly after the signing, however, Chicago selected Mitchell Trubisky with the 2nd overall pick in the draft, instantly creating pressure around the position. Once the regular season began, Glennon struggled to maintain consistency. Turnovers and stalled drives quickly became a problem, and the offense rarely generated momentum. After only 4 starts, the coaching staff made a decisive change and named Trubisky the starter. For a player who had just received starting-level money, losing the job that quickly highlighted how uncertain the original plan had been. Chicago released Glennon the following offseason after paying most of the guaranteed portion of his contract. Neil O'Donnell. The Jets invest in a Super Bowl quarterback, and the season unravels. The New York Jets entered the 1996 offseason searching for credibility at quarterback after several losing seasons. Neil O'Donnell had just guided Pittsburgh to a Super Bowl appearance and carried a reputation as a steady veteran capable of managing an offense and avoiding mistakes. For a franchise desperate to change direction, his availability created a rare opportunity to acquire a proven starter. New York signed O'Donnell to a 5-year contract worth $25 million, the largest free agent investment in team history at the time. The expectation centered on stability and leadership. The Jets hoped his experience in Pittsburgh's playoff runs could provide structure to an offense that had struggled to establish consistency. The season quickly collapsed. O'Donnell opened the year as the starter, but the team lost his first 6 games before a shoulder injury ended his season prematurely. Without reliable quarterback play, the offense stalled, and the Jets finished with a 1-15 record, one of the worst seasons in franchise history. This partnership never delivered the transformation the organization had envisioned, despite O'Donnell's impressive numbers the following year. Scott Mitchell. Detroit pays for a breakout season, and the gamble backfires. Detroit entered the 1994 offseason, hoping to strengthen its passing attack around running back Barry Sanders and an offense that already had explosive potential. Scott Mitchell had just completed a surprising breakout stretch in Miami while filling in for an injured Dan Marino, displaying a powerful arm and producing several impressive statistical performances. The Lions interpreted that brief surge as evidence that Mitchell could become a franchise quarterback. Detroit signed him to a major free agent contract, expecting him to lead the offense for years and provide the vertical passing threat that could balance the running game. The investment reflected the belief that his Miami performances represented the beginning of a sustained career rise. Once installed as the starter, however, Mitchell struggled to consistently replicate that earlier production. Turnovers and uneven decision-making frequently disrupted the offense, and Detroit's passing attack never reached the level the organization had anticipated when it made the signing. The gap between expectation and reality became increasingly obvious as seasons passed. Although Mitchell produced occasional strong statistical seasons, the overall tenure never justified the massive investment Detroit had made. If you enjoyed this, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so it would mean a lot if you subscribed. Thanks for watching. Chris Carter to Minnesota Vikings, 1990. Philadelphia selected Chris Carter in the 4th round of the 1987 supplemental draft, sacrificing its 1988 4th-round choice as compensation. Early professional seasons displayed clear potential. By 1989, he produced 45 catches for 605 yards and 11 touchdowns, emerging as a dependable target thanks to precise route running and acrobatic sideline grabs that drew attention throughout the competition. Despite that performance, off-field problems threatened his future. Alcohol and drug addiction created growing concern inside Philadelphia's front office and coaching staff led by Buddy Ryan. Leaders inside the franchise felt the situation had begun affecting discipline within the locker room, forcing difficult conversations about Carter's long-term place on the roster. Only 2 games into the 1990 campaign, Philadelphia made a stunning decision. Carter was released outright instead of being traded. Ryan publicly stated the roster required athletes capable of staying away from alcohol and drugs, turning the transaction into a national headline. After clearing waivers, Carter signed with Minnesota, where coaches placed him in a more structured environment and encouraged treatment and accountability. The move reshaped both his life and his professional path. Over the next decade in Minnesota, he produced 1,004 receptions, 12,383 receiving yards, and 110 touchdowns, while earning 8 Pro Bowl selections and 2 first-team All-Pro honors. Carter eventually finished with 1,101 catches, 13,899 yards, and 130 touchdowns, ranking 2nd in touchdown receptions at that time behind Jerry Rice. Minnesota gained a future Hall of Fame pass catcher without surrendering draft capital, while Philadelphia received nothing in return. Carter's enshrinement in the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2013 confirmed how dramatically that decision changed history. Brett Favre to Green Bay Packers, 1992. Brett Favre's professional story began quietly in 1991 when Atlanta selected the Southern Mississippi quarterback 33rd overall in the 2nd round. Falcons' leadership, including head coach Jerry Glanville, questioned his preparation habits and comfort inside their offensive system. Playing opportunities were nearly non-existent during his rookie campaign. Favre attempted only 4 passes, finishing with 0 completions and 2 interceptions, including a throw against Washington that turned into a defensive touchdown. Atlanta's confidence in the young passer faded quickly. During February 1992, the Falcons sent Favre to Green Bay in exchange for the 17th overall selection in the upcoming draft. Packers general manager Ron Wolf pushed aggressively for the deal after scouting Favre previously while working with the New York Jets. Wolf remained convinced the quarterback possessed rare arm strength and competitiveness that simply required the right environment. Green Bay initially opened the 1992 campaign with Don Majkowski as starter. That changed in Week 2 against Cincinnati when Majkowski suffered an ankle injury. Favre stepped onto the field as the replacement. His first pass for the Packers ended in an interception, yet later in the same contest, he threw a dramatic touchdown that secured the victory. That sequence launched a remarkable run for the franchise. During his 16-year period with Green Bay, Favre led everyone with relentless intensity. He captured 3 consecutive MVP awards from 1995 through 1997, guided the club to victory in Super Bowl 31, and reached another championship game the following year. Favre also produced a record streak of 297 straight regular season starts at quarterback. By the end of his playing time, he accumulated 71,838 passing yards and 508 touchdown passes, records at the time, and entered the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2016. Charles Haley to Dallas Cowboys, 1992. San Francisco selected the James Madison defender in the 4th round of the 86 NFL Draft. early runs displayed explosive pass-rushing ability as he shifted between outside linebacker and defensive end depending on the scheme. His speed and leverage helped disrupt opposing quarterbacks while contributing to championship victories in Super Bowl 23 and Super Bowl 24. By the early 1990s, Haley had developed a reputation as a dominant defender, yet tensions inside the locker room grew steadily. Reports described heated confrontations with teammates and emotional outbursts that unsettled the environment around the roster. San Francisco's leadership eventually concluded the situation risked harming overall chemistry despite Haley's productivity. During August 1992, the 49ers sent Haley to Dallas for a 1993 second-round selection and a 1994 third-round choice. Cowboys head coach Jimmy Johnson saw the defender as the missing element for a rising roster already featuring Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, and Michael Irvin. Johnson wanted a relentless edge presence capable of harassing quarterbacks throughout critical games. The impact appeared immediately. Dallas finished the 1992 campaign with a 13-3 record before defeating Buffalo 52-17 in Super Bowl 27, launching a dynasty that added championships in Super Bowl 28 and Super Bowl 30. Haley accumulated 100.5 sacks and finished with 5 Super Bowl rings, more than any other defensive player in league history. His induction into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2015 reinforced how that transaction supplied Dallas with the final defensive force required for dominance. Marshall Faulk to St. Louis Rams, 1999. Indianapolis Colts picked Marshall Faulk as their second overall selection in the 1994 draft, with the intention of making him their focal point of attack. Faulk's rushing ability, receiving skill, and pass protection separated him from traditional power runners. Across 5 campaigns with the Colts, he surpassed 1,000 rushing yards 4 times, while frequently recording more than 50 receptions. After the 1998 campaign, Faulk sought a new contract extension, but negotiations stalled while Indianapolis reorganized its roster around young quarterback Peyton Manning. Management faced a financial decision between investing heavily at running back or prioritizing the developing passer. Eventually, the front office opted to move Faulk, opening the door for another franchise. In April 1999, Indianapolis sent him to St. Louis in exchange for second and fifth round selections. The Rams immediately constructed their attack around his versatility under offensive coordinator Mike Martz. Surrounded by quarterback Kurt Warner and receivers Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt, Faulk helped create an explosive system, later nicknamed the greatest show on turf. The 1999 campaign produced extraordinary numbers. St. Louis led the competition with 526 points, while Faulk recorded 1,381 rushing yards, 87 receptions, and more than 2,400 total yards from scrimmage. That surge propelled the Rams to a 13-3 record and a Super Bowl 34 victory over Tennessee. Faulk later captured 3 consecutive awards from 1999 through 2001 and finished with 12,279 rushing yards, 6,875 receiving yards, and 136 touchdowns. His Hall of Fame induction in 2011 highlighted how dramatically that trade reshaped offensive football. Keyshawn Johnson to Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 2000. Keyshawn Johnson, a USC standout, came into the league with high expectations. The physical wide receiver quickly turned into the focal point of New York's passing attack through strong hands and contested catches along short and intermediate routes. Results climbed steadily during his first 3 campaigns, highlighted by 83 receptions for 1,144 yards and 8 touchdowns in 1998, while the Jets reached the AFC Championship game under head coach Bill Parcells. Despite those contributions, tensions developed between Johnson and the franchise. Public comments criticizing offensive usage created friction, and his autobiography titled "Just Give Me the Damn Ball" amplified those frustrations. Although performance remained strong, leadership in New York began exploring potential deals by the end of the 1999 campaign. A major transaction followed in April 2000 when Tampa Bay acquired the receiver in exchange for 2 first-round selections, the 13th overall pick in 2000 and the 27th in 2001. At that moment, Johnson became the first wide receiver exchanged for 2 first-rounders, illustrating how highly franchises valued elite pass catchers. Tampa Bay already possessed a dominant defense featuring Warren Sapp, Derek Brooks, and John Lynch, but lacked a reliable top receiving option. Johnson filled that role immediately, producing back-to-back campaigns with 106 catches and 1,266 yards before contributing to a championship run in 2002. The Buccaneers defeated Oakland 48-21 in Super Bowl 37, with Johnson adding 69 receiving yards during the victory. He finished his professional career with 814 receptions, 10,571 yards, and 64 touchdowns. Terrell Owens to Philadelphia Eagles, 2004. During the late 1990s and early 2000s, San Francisco relied heavily on Terrell Owens to generate explosive passing plays. Drafted in the 3rd round in 1996, the powerful wide receiver steadily developed into a centerpiece of the 49ers' aerial attack. Over 8 campaigns, he produced 592 receptions, 8,572 receiving yards, and 81 touchdowns, while forming a productive connection with Hall of Fame quarterback Steve Young. Despite elite output, tension gradually grew inside the organization. Owens frequently clashed with squad members and coaches, including quarterback Jeff Garcia. Public criticism and locker room disputes created friction throughout the roster, forcing leadership to consider a major change after the 2003 schedule. The situation surrounding Owens' departure quickly turned complicated. Paperwork submitted by his representation attempted to establish free agent status, yet league officials ruled the filing arrived too late. San Francisco therefore retained control of his rights and initially negotiated a deal sending him to Baltimore. Owens publicly rejected the destination and threatened not to play there. Arbitration involving the Players Association eventually redirected the transaction to Philadelphia. The Eagles sent a 5th-round selection and receiver Brandon Whiting to complete the exchange. Owens immediately elevated the offense led by Donovan McNabb, recording 77 catches, 1,200 yards, and 14 touchdowns as Philadelphia finished 13-3 and advanced to Super Bowl 39. Randy Moss to New England Patriots, 2007. Few receivers reshaped defensive strategy like Randy Moss during his early professional years. Minnesota selected the Marshall Star with the 21st pick in the 1998 draft, adding a deep threat weapon with rare height and acceleration. His rookie campaign alone produced 69 receptions, 1,313 yards, and 17 touchdowns while stretching defensive coverage across the field. Performance remained extraordinary across 7 years with the Vikings. Moss accumulated 587 receptions, 9,142 yards, and 90 touchdowns while earning repeated Pro Bowl recognition. A 2005 transaction sent him to Oakland, where unstable quarterback play and constant coaching changes limited offensive rhythm. Following a disastrous 2-14 finish in 2006, Raiders leadership pursued a fresh direction. In April 2007, Oakland shipped Moss to New England for a 4th-round draft selection. Analysts throughout the sport questioned the modest compensation for such a dynamic vertical weapon. The partnership with Tom Brady produced historic numbers. New England completed a perfect 16-0 regular campaign while scoring 589 points. Moss recorded 98 receptions, 1,493 yards, and a single-season record of 23 touchdown catches, fueling one of the most explosive offenses ever assembled. Amari Cooper to Dallas Cowboys, 2018. Huge expectations surrounded Amari Cooper after Oakland selected the Alabama receiver 4th overall in the 2015 draft. Known for crisp route running and smooth acceleration, he delivered immediate results, recording more than 1,000 receiving yards in each of his first 2 professional campaigns. The Raiders' offensive momentum declined during the 2017 and early 2018 schedule. Injuries, scheme adjustments, and defensive attention reduced Cooper's statistical output. Meanwhile, head coach John Gruden began reshaping the roster in pursuit of long-term draft capital. On October 22, 2018, Oakland completed a headline-grabbing deal, sending Cooper to Dallas in exchange for a 2019 first-round selection. Mid-year trades involving first-round compensation are rare, which made the transaction particularly notable. The change delivered instant results. Cooper quickly developed chemistry with quarterback Dak Prescott, producing 53 receptions, 725 yards, and 6 touchdowns during the remainder of the campaign. Dallas finished 10-6, captured the NFC East title, and won a playoff game against Seattle. Brandon Cooks to New England Patriots, 2017. Oregon State standout Brandon Cooks moved into the league as the 20th overall selection in the 2014 draft. The speedy receiver quickly earned recognition as a dangerous vertical weapon within the New Orleans passing attack, regularly stretching coverage and creating explosive plays. Across 3 years in Louisiana, he produced multiple 1,000-yard campaigns while working alongside quarterback Drew Brees. In March 2017, the Saints completed a deal sending Cooks to New England, receiving first and third-round selections in return. The Patriots had just secured victory in Super Bowl 51 and sought additional speed within the passing structure led by Tom Brady. Cooks delivered immediate impact, finishing the 2017 schedule with 65 receptions, 1,082 yards, and 7 touchdowns. New England advanced once again to the championship stage, facing Philadelphia in Super Bowl 52. Early in the contest, Cooks suffered a concussion after a hit while attempting a reception across the middle, forcing him out of the game as the Patriots eventually fell 41-33. Stephon Diggs to Buffalo Bills, 2020. Following his college career at Maryland, Stephon Diggs landed in the 5th round of the 2015 draft. Despite the modest draft position, the talented route runner quickly developed into a dependable receiving target within Minnesota's passing attack. One of the most memorable moments of his early career occurred during the 2017 NFC Divisional Playoff game, when Diggs caught a dramatic last-second touchdown against New Orleans, a play widely known as the Minneapolis Miracle. Tension eventually surfaced regarding Minnesota's offensive philosophy, which relied heavily on the running game. In March 2020, the Vikings completed a major transaction, sending Diggs to Buffalo in exchange for a package of draft selections, including a first-round pick. The results transformed the Bills' offense. Diggs produced 127 receptions and 1,535 yards during their 2020 run, leading the entire league in both categories, while helping quarterback Josh Allen deliver a dramatic statistical breakout. Brown to Philadelphia Eagles, 2022. After Tennessee picked a Jay Brown in the 2019 draft, it quickly discovered it had acquired a physically dominant receiving weapon, capable of breaking tackles and generating huge gains after the catch. His first 3 campaigns produced strong results: 52 catches for 1,051 receiving distance and 8 scores in 2019, followed by 70 receptions for 1,075 through the air with 11 scoring plays in 2020, and 63 grabs producing 869 receiving yards with 5 end-zone receptions in 2021. Following the 2021 schedule, negotiations between Brown and Tennessee leadership centered on a long-term extension. The wide receiver market had exploded across the league as several stars secured massive new deals. Tennessee's front office hesitated to commit to a contract of that magnitude, creating tension between the player and organization. The situation reached a turning point during the 2022 draft. Tennessee completed an exchange, sending Brown to Philadelphia in return for the 18th overall pick, plus the 101st overall selection. Immediately afterward, the Eagles signed Brown to a 4-year agreement worth $100 million. Philadelphia targeted the acquisition to accelerate quarterback Jalen Hurts' development. The impact was immediate. Brown delivered 88 catches for 1,496 receiving yards, along with 11 scores as the Eagles finished 14-3 and secured the top NFC seed. Philadelphia advanced to Super Bowl 57, where Brown contributed 96 receiving distance and a scoring catch in a narrow 38-35 defeat. Tyreek Hill to Miami Dolphins, 2022. Tyreek Hill's path to the league included stops at Garden City Community College, Oklahoma State, and West Alabama before the 2016 draft brought his name at pick 165. Kansas City initially used Hill as a return specialist before his remarkable speed transformed him into a devastating receiving weapon. Across several campaigns, he earned multiple All-Pro honors and played a major role in the Chiefs' championship victory in Super Bowl 54, alongside quarterback Patrick Mahomes and tight end Travis Kelce. Hill's value extended beyond traditional statistics. Defensive coordinators frequently altered coverage structures because of his deep speed, motion usage, and ability to create explosive scoring opportunities from almost anywhere on the field. By the end of the 2021 schedule, Kansas City possessed one of football's most dangerous offensive groups built around Mahomes, Kelce, and Hill. The move occurred largely because of contract economics. The receiver market had surged across the league, and Hill sought a massive extension reflecting that rise. On March 23, 2022, Kansas City sent Hill to Miami in exchange for 5 draft selections, including first, second, and fourth-round picks in 2022, plus additional 2023 selections. Hill then secured a 4-year, $120 million extension with $72.2 million guaranteed. Miami pursued the acquisition to accelerate quarterback Tua Tagovailoa's development inside head coach Mike McDaniel's speed-driven offensive design. Hill delivered immediately, posting 119 catches for 1,710 receiving yards with 7 scoring receptions in 2022, while establishing a franchise record for receiving yardage. He followed that with another remarkable campaign in 2023, finishing with 119 grabs for 1,799 through the air and 13 scores while leading the NFL in receiving. Christian McCaffrey to San Francisco 49ers, 2022. Selected 8th in the 2017 draft, Christian McCaffrey immediately gave Carolina a rare offensive weapon who could dominate as both a runner and receiver. His peak came during the historic 2019 campaign, when he surpassed 1,000 rushing distance and 1,000 receiving yards in the same year. At his best, McCaffrey functioned as far more than a traditional running back. Carolina deployed him in multiple alignments, including the backfield, slot positions, and wide receiver sets. This versatility allowed him to attack linebackers and safeties in space while serving as the primary engine of the offense. By 2022, the Panthers had entered a rebuild and prioritized collecting draft capital. On October 20th, Carolina completed a deal sending McCaffrey to San Francisco in exchange for second, third, and fourth-round selections in 2023, plus a 2024 fifth-round pick. Financially, the arrangement also mattered because San Francisco only owed $690,000 for the remainder of the 2022 schedule. The results appeared quickly. After the move, McCaffrey produced 746 rushing yards and 464 receiving yards with 10 total scores in 11 games for San Francisco. The following competitive year, he delivered a spectacular 2023 campaign featuring 1,459 rushing distance, 564 receiving yards, and 21 total scores, while capturing NFL Offensive Player of the Year honors.